Wait, did you go live?
Roll 20.
Now you're live.
Hello, everybody. We are starting off on a very giggly note as my players don't seem to understand we have a show to do. But no, actually, welcome everybody for joining us at a thankfully earlier time slot than we've been used to doing. This is the Adventures in Agni all PoC D&D 5e crew joining at a 1 hour earlier time slot in a homebrew setting of my own creation in the world of Agni, world, continent, kind of both. And so we, as I said before, we're going to be playing D&D 5e here. This is changed around certain aspects of the game and certain things to focus on. They're a lot more open, and we don't tend to focus as much on combat here. There's a lot more roleplay and things of that sort. And also, because of my particular players, more memeing. But well, my players look at me in shock as though this is a strange thing for me to say. But so we can get quickly into the game, just want to give a quick shout out to our new sponsor, Roll20, and our returning sponsors of Tabletop Loot, So Nerdware, and Devin Rue for supporting this channel. Thank you so much for all that you do and allow us to keep going and doing this and enabling our shenanigans. Also, I'm going to give a shout out if you, as a viewer, want to support our group in continuing this game and supporting all the wonderful people here. Patreon is the best way to support us. Check out our Patreon. Info will be in the chat in just a moment. And as always, if you're interested in joining this amazing group of people here, feel free to join our Discord. We are currently having, as I've been prompted, September this month, so feel free to get into that for Twitch and also support folks through connecting to the community on Discord. We talk about a lot of things, some things really, really gay, some things a lot of POC focus, and sometimes really trans POC, and all of the different ranges of amazing players that we have in our community. So join us on Discord. So, and also, if you provide any sort of subs, bits, any of those sorts of forms of helping out our community, the players will get additional stuff. Or if you want to be evil, which is always fun to do, you can give the GM more stuff. I will need it, but not actually. So, with that out of the way, just going to give our players a quick chance to introduce themselves, just who you are, what you'll be playing. Let's start with our fantastic, wonderful Mariam.
Oh, hey, it's me. Hi. Sorry. Yeah, because I was doing all the producery things. Yes, so you can find me on Twitter at media_junkie, and today I am playing Dee, the Hobgoblin Lore Wizard.
Fantastic. We will now shift over to our fantastic, lovely Lily.
Hello, I am Lily. I'm Adelis on Life on Twitter, and I am playing Bo, who is a wild hunt shifter barbarian.
Fantastic. Next up, our fiery knowledge boy extraordinaire, Serlaf, otherwise known as Aletta.
Yeah, I'm Aletta. I play a Serlaf, a Fire Ganassi knowledge cleric.
And last but not least, our bardy fiendish warlock boy, Ant.
Hi, I'm Ant. I'm playing Piatt, hobgoblin sibling to Didi and Bardlock.
Wonderful. So, thank you to everyone who's joining us as we get back into where we found our players last time. After having a bit of a bout in the local combat rings, getting a little bit of exposure to the perhaps a little bit too overzealous enthusiasm of many of the local acolytes of Cord in the northern region of Chantico. The party find themselves at the inn of Cyrolali's Haven under the care of the fantastic, occasionally a little bit flirtatious rock gnome Fenya. And you find yourselves, we're going to say just for the sake of everyone just starting fresh for the new day, it is a new day. We find ourselves at the inn having multiple different ways you could engage with going about into the town. And I know at the end of the last session, which was a couple of weeks ago, folks had expressed various interests that they wanted to follow up on. So this session is very much going to be, which of those interests would you like to start pursuing at this time? I know that Bo had indicated wanting to help out, I believe, see Arden, help out around sort of the community, building related materials and other things of that sort. Azerlath and Dee had indicated wanting to look into the history and libraries nearby, and Paya had been interested in, I believe, just sort of getting a feel for the local connections and also various individuals around the community. So, with that being the case, like I said, we are going to start. The group is together. If you would like to split off for your separate tasks and such, feel free to do so, but I leave it up to you to decide how do you want to go about doing this. The region is open to you at this time.
We.
Well,
Bo.
okay.
Yeah. I was like, Bo, do you wanna go first?
So there's a couple things that she's interested in, and like one of them is definitely like doing some stuff that is more manual labor, keeping busy sort of thing, and like keeping in shape. So I think maybe the first thing she might want to check out is like how does that all happen in this town, because it does seem like there's more of a like a community idea in this town. They've been offered the free food for a certain amount of time, and so like in terms of how the town operates, like is there some way that she could find out how she could contribute?
Okay, so for that lead and all these different things for you looking into the different leads around the area, Alfenya tends to be a good resource point for just sort of pointing out where you might want to go around town. So Alfenya will indicate that there are two individuals that might be best to talk to in regards to looking into those matters. One, you get the name of Gloria, who she describes who as a Goliath cleric of Cord, who tends to act as the head of both smithing and architectural material gathering. So a lot of more of the direct physical materials you use to help maintain a lot of the temples, courtyards, and structures around the area. If you want to be involved in manual labor for that, that's one way of getting into it, and also just getting a feel for what some of the more like basic laborers around the area tend to be involved with. So Gloria, the Goliath cleric of Cord, that's one name. The other name she gives you is a name that you recognize. It is the name of the Tabaxi urban planner that you met when you first arrived in the city by the name of Sayana. So those are two potential people you can go talk with. Alfenia will indicate to you that both of those people tend to have to coordinate a lot. Obviously, one being more the urban kind of planner and architect and doing the designs, and then having to actually check in with Gloria to see, does this work? Is this too much? Is this too extra? Or is this like, can we actually do the materials for this?
Mm-hmm.
So those are two people you can go talk to. They tend to hang out somewhere near some of the textile areas and some of where what might be called like a guild here for a lot of those kinds of arts and crafts and mason kind of workers are. So that is where you could go for that. So we can pursue that lead. I can, if you would like, I can attend to you in just a second while I get everyone else sort of situated for their different spots, and then we can sort of go down the list. Bo, the pair of the knowledge nerds at this point, and then also our wonderful, fantastic party boy. We can do last to see where all of your connections will put you around the city. If that works.
Yep.
Is it possible for me to wake up and poke both Bo and a Surlath before they head out to do whatever they want?
Yes, we're assuming that this is very much like this is the morning. You are all sitting down in the sort of dining room area. You've been fed. You've been given very rich kind of cinnamon rice milk kind of flavored drinks with a nice bit of sweetness and some kind of little. It looks like little raised baked corn cakes that have little base layers of beans, some bits of cheese, and some vegetables on top of it. So you've been fed a very hearty breakfast. Once again, no charge because you're still within the 1 week period of being accounted for.
What are
But
they
this is very
called?
much like, out of character, these are sopes. For any of you who know what those are, they are freshly made, and you can. It's a really nice texture of. It's not quite like hard, but it's not like a soft kind of like cornmeal to them. It's just hard enough to hold the base layer without becoming kind of soggy with the beans and the cheese that sort of melted on top of it and the little bits of like freshly chopped up onions and tomatoes to it.
Out of character, I just want our viewers to know that after every session where Angela mentions food in the following week, I go to either a local Guatemalan or a Peruvian restaurant, because they're the only two South American restaurants, to order whatever our characters ate, because I want to know what they taste like.
The hunger is
That's like,
real.
That's more Mexican.
Yeah, that one is more explicitly Mexican, but there are like the Bolivian stuff will come later in the session. For all of our viewers who are just joining us for the first time, I tend to not go very many sessions without including a bunch of Bolivian food, because I will die by my country, because I am a Bolivia
I'm also
stan.
Bolivian.
Look, food is on brand for
Thing, yeah.
It's a thing.
Absolutely.
Food is on brand for a stream in which I'm running, and it's also on brand for any stream in which Mariam is involved in. Like, this is the takeaway for people who are new to our community and this game. Mariam's games will involve food in some capacity, and we will all be blessed all the better for it. But yeah, you will be able to coordinate with Bo and Azerlath regarding anything you want to take care of. So before we get into everyone else's, we can get into that.
Back in character. Hey, Bo, I need you for something, perhaps later in the day. Do you know when you will be back? Or if not back, where I can meet you? Maybe early afternoon?
Sure. This is kind of like a scouting mission at this point, just to sort of see what's going on and how I may be able to involve myself in some physical labor to keep in shape. So I'll probably be back for lunch anyway.
If you're not back by lunch, where should I go find you, or how should I go find you?
I'm gonna go check out the textile side of town, because that seems to be where I can probably find things that are involved in, manual labor and building and all that. So that's probably where I'll be.
Yeah, you're pretty easy to spot in a crowd, so that should be good. And Azerlath, I'm actually planning to go speak to some laborers myself, but I was wondering, you wouldn't happen to be doing research, like, in general, would you? Because that seems like a thing you might be doing.
Yes, that is my job.
Right. So I picked these up and I had questions about them, but I figure you might actually have more headway in researching them than me. So
of course.
First, I gave you a book a while ago. I don't know if that book is useful. If it's not, feel free to sell it. But,
okay.
Also, here are some, and I dump all the lavender crystals I got into Azerlath's lap. So what I'm curious about is basically these nullified magic to an extent when we were fighting the griffin creatures. So they were around us always, but they only really sort of came into effect when we had water around. So I'm curious if they react to water in general, and also because it was raining really heavily and they were in like places where the water collected, but also the water was flowing. I'm curious if they react to water in general, if they react to rainfall, if they react to water pooling in puddles, or if they react specifically to water flow. Because I didn't really get a chance to test that because guy upstairs in my head got angry at me. But yeah, have all these. I just dump like my random paper notes and a bunch of lavender crystals. And I will remove those from my inventory because apparently my inventory is just all for Azerlath gradually. But yeah, I'm just curious. You don't have to do it today. It's not really urgent. I'm just curious if anything comes of that.
Yeah, that could potentially be useful at any rate.
Cool beans.
Yeah.
Nom nom nom. I eat some.
Noting for the record, thank you, Lescribe, which I believe is Lily, for subbing to the party. So you get to cheekily game the system and give it advantage. Would you like it to be to yourself? You like it as a thing you can do?
No, I will. I'll do.
Save
you know
it.
what? I'll give it. I'll give it to Baya, actually.
Okay, Baya, you have an advantage on one of your rolls for whenever you need it.
Thank you so much. I feel like I've been given bardic inspiration from on high.
From the highest of highs. So, okay, so so you're interested in taking a look to going to talk to some laborers, probably similar direction to Bo, but not quite in the same exact spot. So you two might be heading off in one direction, and I will get to DD and Azalath in a second. But I'm just going to note. So for our viewers' benefit, we, God damn it, Ant in the chat. We do have a fifth player who has was not able to make it to the game today. So we love you, Gemma. We are looking forward to when we have you back next week. But you all, so for the benefit of in character and out of character, you will hear that Lapu will take some time to indicate they are not feeling particularly well, but that they are going to take some time to go stay in their room and sort of meditate on a lot of different things they've been processing since the other evening. So both, it is an actual very in character thing for them to do, and out of character, it makes this just easier than. I don't like role playing PCs because I don't want to take like any of y'all's agency away, but that is the thing. So now, DD and Azerlath. So, what are you interested in doing?
Since oh gosh, Lauren's character,
Sochi.
Sorry, what is it?
No, that's right. That is
Sochi.
Correct pronunciation.
Doing a task for their house, and I think we had a favor, and I was wondering if that could be a place to sort of make use of their library resources or something.
So this is something that Fenya would be able to let you know. Some of the noble houses are just more established sort of places among the northern regions. So they have like most households in different communities, people have varying levels of like their private libraries with different stocks of information. But the core centers of information in the city tend to be split between either folks who have more recently switched in the past years to textual-based documentation of information, and you would know this because you went on the date with Alfenia the other evening during the other session. Alfenia would have indicated that there are certain sections of the city, I think at this point in time, based mainly in what might be considered the Drow quadrant of the city, that are dedicated to sort of like active old folks' homes and community centers or community sort of collections, where a lot of the homes are built around the idea of protecting essentially the way that I imagine sort of Azerlath's position is like you are a scribe, you document knowledge, you make sure the archives are maintained and safe. Same kind of principle, but this is for like imagine like for the older members or the folks who have different levels of ability to them. This is sort of like an active care unit. So think of it like maintaining the records in this case is an actual like human kind of thing. It is an active care process where people are taking care of the literal walking history and memories of these people who live there. So you have two potential locations you could head in the direction of, depending on which sort of information you're looking for first. You might find it in both places, but you might get different takes on the situation depending on where you go.
Since I'm not much of a people person necessarily, I think I will go for the archival area first.
Yeah, Azerlath might have more sway there as a scribe of a literal god at scribing.
I'm hoping my first kiln rep maybe helps me through, but I definitely would probably lean heavily on Azerlath to get in.
Hi there, I'm Azerlath. I follow this literal scribe of a god. It's kind of a good starting pitch. It's like it's a good elevator pitch for when you want to get into a library. It's like, hey, what are you doing here? It's like, I follow the scribe of a god. By all means.
And I just sort of scuttle behind Azerlath.
But okay, so that direction, Alfenia will tell you that there is. You might, oddly enough, be interested in speaking with folks who work over in the divining and not oral history. The divining and astrology. Astrological affairs sort of section of the city, which is a little bit closer to the northern portions of the city where that might lead you more and more towards the statue you all saw in the distance. But oddly enough, there are a lot of folks of divination and certain druidic bents who also seem to get visions or get a sense of like going back through history. It's like they're like, okay, we have these documented records. Let's go double check and see if this is actually the case. And it's kind of helpful to have those kinds of folks who specialize in those practices available in those areas. But you know that there are a couple people. You would get the name IU, AAYU, and you would get the name Rosa Erwin. Rosa, Rosa, Erwin, Aerwyn. You would get those two names as potential contacts. One is a bit more of an art historian, but art is kind of integral to how the city and how a lot of aspects of the world of this region have been sort of brought up over time. And the diviner would be a good head for looking into the history of various arcane affairs. But yeah, both pairs, you have your directions you can head towards. If you'd like to get going on that direction, we can split it. Whichever group would like to go first, we can attend to those ones as we go along.
I'm okay with Bo going ahead unless...
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Sure.
Okay. So in that case, Fenya will leave you all with a nice bit of freshly baked bread, a very kind of thick, crusty kind of bread that is quite tasty. It's not particularly sweet or heavy, but it's just the right amount of like, this will probably be rock solid if you leave it out for more than a couple hours. But until that point, it's the perfect level of crunch and taste to it. Just as like a little snack for all of you. Then it looks like she's kind of taken the time to carve the loaves down the middle, and there's a fried egg with a little bit of tomato and lettuce inside of it. So it's set aside for you all to have like a little lunch pack, because that is Fenya. She is just like the nicest hostess of all time.
I could probably eat it en route and it doesn't survive lunch.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Bo finishes it like as she's walking out the door.
I mean, that is a mood. That is a mood.
I think you're muted, and...
I was gonna say same, but I guess that's awkward because that just leaves a Surlath with the only. We all just walk and eat.
It's so good. The smell, the perfect kind of like smushiness versus like, you know, just pillowy goodness. How can you, especially if it's gonna get harder later, how can you not just eat it right now?
Right. Oh, exactly.
And so, for both groups' benefits, which regardless of the direction you head, you are able to bear witness to much of Chantico in sort of full swing. You go down many of these very perfectly well-aligned different sort of street blocks and such, the courtyards and diminishing and shrinking size step pattern buildings all around you, the open courtyards. You hear an occasional song of happiness and joy, and even play productions just between a few groups. It almost looks like there's an improv group happening at one corner. In another section, you hear combat happening again. But again, it's still very much in the very officiated, specifically monitored kind of way that many people in the community do this. And it's just a very robust, lively city. After a certain point, you're able to split off the two pairs. Didi and Azerlath heading a little bit more in a northerly direction, and Baya and Bo heading more towards a western kind of direction. And but regardless of which group it is who's heading in what direction, outside of just the noise of just hectic, like not quite city life, it's bustling, but it's not the same level of just dense packed people that many of you who've grown up in somewhere like Backfire would have. This one is a kind of just, it's alive here, and occasionally throughout the air you actually see griffins and eagles, a little bit more like out of character. They're a little bit more shaped and stylized, designed to be like condors in sort of their shape, and just flying around through the area, occasionally going down to some of the peaks of temples and some of the courtyards, and people just playing with them. There's little kid shifters and tieflings all around that are talking with them. and it's a bustling city. There is a lot of smell of food just in open jars. They're very intricately and wonderfully designed with jade and limestone kind of patterns with various scripts of celestial, primordial, and very old Elvish. But as you go through this, the smells overtaking you, all the noise around you. Bo and Baya, you find yourselves, because Baya wanted to go more talk to workers, and Bo was more looking to find people to do the direct lifting work with, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you find yourselves outside of one of these sort of open courtyard kind of temples. The courtyard in front of this, again, another one of these stepstone kind of pattern buildings that rises up, and you're able to get up these get up these steps, which you notice on some sides of them have also sort of not super steep inclines, but ones that seem designed to make it easier for people to actually climb up if they don't have quite the same level of mobility that others do. It seems like out of character, these are just real, they're physically accessible buildings, that they've thought of that in the design of a lot of construction and architecture. And you see at the top wearing robes of kind of this a mixture of deep red and blue, and it almost looks like just an outer coating of volcanic rock, this kind of deep lava, bright red orange to them, with little bits of blue contrasting around this holy symbol, with a hand holding a thunderbolt with a spider resting on the end of it. You see a rather large humanoid figure, almost what at first glance, because of how tall they are, would seem like just a rather tall humanoid or a very short giant, as they're about 9 feet tall standing up. There's various tattoos all across their face. They have an incredibly muscular build, and even beneath the robes, which seem to cover most of their form, you can tell this person's built pretty well, and also seems to even be wearing like breastplate underneath the robes. You imagine this must be Gloria.
Sure. Yes. So Bo is going to, she's taking the direct approach. She's just going to walk right up and say, "You must be Gloria."
Who is asking? And before I get into that response, I'd just like to note Monopot Studios and their party has just threw down a raid for us. Thank you for joining us and welcoming to the party. We are just getting into our party wandering around the northern region of Chantico, and our resident barbarian wild hunt shifter speaking with a rather tall Goliath. And you see, even though you've seen a couple of the holy symbols around with just people by the streets and from the courtyard, this one seems to have almost like a specific metallurgical sort of like layer, like finely designed and smithed coating of onyx and sort of jade all around the symbol. Like it looks to be very finely done. And she turns to you, and having said that, she says, "Who is asking?"
"Oh, my name's Bo. I'm new here. And I was just wanting to find out some information about maybe being able to help out around the city. I have had a very generous offer of a week's worth of food for myself and my party for free. But I like to stay in shape, and I want to be able to contribute a little bit. And it sounds like you might be the person who can help me out with that."
Well, it's a pleasure to meet someone so keen on putting their best foot forward and getting involved in the thick of things. That brings a lot of joy to my heart, and I'll happily get you started on some work. I imagine you don't want to wait too long and just want to get right into it.
Sure, sure. Although I am a little bit curious about she's actually curious about the holy symbol. So Bo does not know anything about any of the gods. Like that's not something that she kind of grew up with or anything. So she has no clue if this is also Cord, like also a follower of Cord, or someone different?
She notices you looking at the symbol. If you're interested, it is cord. This is a symbol of cord. I do have folks who do come by the region and look a bit not off put, but look peculiar in their expressions when they see it. I like to express my faith in a more direct means, and I've grown up in much of this city, smithing, creating different pieces and works of martial art. How shall we say? This is just part of my devotion to them.
Sure. Yeah, I actually took part in myself and the rest of my party. We did one of those fights the other day. Sorry, out of character. I do not.
It was the previous day. You are good.
It was the previous day. Okay.
So before we get more into that, noting for the record, Blue Gray Sky has joined us. Thank you for subbing and welcome to the party. And also, do not worry, Manic Pixie Girl. Piatt is not murdering priests with tuna. This was a pre-stream related shenanigans.
Pre-stream by like 5 seconds.
By like 5 seconds. So not that much pre-show shenanigans, but yeah. Don't worry. No one has died of tuna yet. Dee Dee has not cast a spell yet.
Yeah.
But Blue Gray Sky,
they haven't opened that magic book yet.
Yes, the joke spell book has not been opened today. That happens later, probably. But if you have anyone in particular, Blue Gray Sky, that you would like to give your advantage or crit to, I believe it's advantage. Yes, it's advantage with the first sub. Anyone you would like to specify for your advantage, feel free to do so. Thank you for subbing. We love you dearly. But yeah, Bo, continue. So yes, it was the other day. They will respond. Gloria will respond to you and say, well, it's a pleasure to see new folks getting so involved with the customs here.
Yeah, I guess, maybe while you show me around, I could also ask you some questions about Cord and the followers and the fighting. If you
of course
wouldn't be offended by someone who knows nothing of these matters.
My dear, it would be a pleasure to give you more a sense of what we do. Those of us who devote ourselves to Cord are signing up for, as I imagine the frills of faith and such can come off as a bit esoteric, if I'm to use a big word people like to throw around here. And I can just give it to you straight while I lead you over to where we get involved with some of the work. But before I get into that, so just double checking. So Piatt, have you joined Bo for this moment, or are you already heading off to the?
I think I'll head off.
Okay, so I wasn't sure. I wanted to make sure that like Gloria is not awkwardly just like, I don't notice the other hobgoblin who's just standing awkwardly here. Just want to make sure I'm not leaving unattended.
I'll walk off.
But okay, yeah, Gloria will start heading you off to sort of one of the other districts, a little bit of ways out of town. As from what you can see, there's different folks that seem to be working in shifts. Certain individuals that are carrying staffs that are made of bits of onyx, jade, limestone, and occasionally you see almost it's like there's vines sprouting out of them, but they're a distinctly red and orange tinge kind of color, and the vibrancy of the tone is very close to like out of character, like lava. Like it's oddly bright and crystalline for something that seems like naturalistic or land-based magic. But at any given point during that walk over, you are able to ask Gloria any sort of questions. I can switch over. I can keep going with that conversation if you'd like, Bo, or I can switch over to Piatt this time and then switch over to Azerla.
That's fine.
Okay, doke. Just making sure. So Piatt. So you probably would have headed off to another section of where some of the textiles and such, a lot of the textile workers and crafts folk are. You see as you're carrying through some of these aisles, it's sort of like an open air market kind of feel. The stalls, not super high, not significantly taller than you, but they're sort of just wooden, just little counters and such. You see various potteries with a very well done, ranging from ornate to very simple designs to them. Some of them you see with infernal writings, but very old infernal, and various bits of celestial, primordial. There's goblin written on some of them. And the crafters seem to span the whole gamut of folks across various races. You see very precise, almost like paranoid levels of focus from a pair of goblins just focusing on this knitting pattern that's happening. And you see, like, occasionally one will like try and sock the other and say, "You did it wrong," and the other will be like, "No, it's fine. We've worked on this for 3 days. Let's just finish it." It's like it's red, orange, yellow, red, orange, yellow, blue, red, orange, yellow, and they're fighting with each other. This is just a thing, and you hear them yelling at each other in Goblin, but outside of just little kerfuffles that are happening throughout that, the marketplace is just, there's a lot of different folks who are working here, and you spot, because I believe everyone in the party was able to see this person, Sayana, the urban planner and architect of the area. Kind of imagine, I'm just going to say, because I keep forgetting their description I originally gave you, it's a Palace cat style tabaxi. So if you know what a Palace, Pallas cat looks like, very big, like proportionately sized fur stretching out that is covered in dust and bits of like mineral fragments. You see them wearing a set of overalls about like 6 feet tall. There's just dust all over the overalls and little bits of like broken minerals everywhere. And they have like in their pocket a couple of like blueprints for designs for buildings. And it just looks like they're sitting down, like just chatting with another tabaxi, just having like a sandwich at this point. It just looks like it's got like a piece of well-cooked sausage inside of it with little bits of like tomato and lettuce.
Okay. A quick bit of retconning. Can I say that Martin and Alpharenz are also brought along?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So I'll turn to them and I'll say, okay, you were recruited by Mathura before I recruited you, yes?
Yeah, that would be right. That's right.
So what is the most... Did you see other people Mathura recruited? Or were you recruited sort of alone and then you headed off?
I just sort of recruited alone. We tend, like I said, we tend to wander. We just fill jobs. We get money to take care of each other. That's really it. It wasn't so much Mathura was like actively looking as of yet. We just sort of found him. Just one of those lucky happenstances, you could say.
What sort of jobs would, for example, you two be most interested in an environment like this? And I indicate that I'm sort of looking at Sayana and sort of the market arrayed around them. Because I want, if possible, to find ways of integrating people that makes them less susceptible to whatever draws them to Mathura. And I suspect, even if you're not necessarily representative, a lot of people must be attracted to Mathura for a similar reason to you two. They're wanderers, or they want something just to do short term.
I mean, I only speak for myself with anything, but we were just looking for some coin, honestly. It's not like there's anything lacking here. I like treating Alfie nicely. He treats me really well, and I want him to be even more taken care of and feel extra special. Folks here just have a good life going on, and I just wanted more money. Plus, Wanderlust is kind of hard not to indulge every now and then, and this seemed like the fastest way to do both of those.
What was the going rate Mathura offered you to begin with?
Somewhere around 300 gold for like just disposing of people, or at least scaring some folks off, not getting as much attention coming to the north while he set up things. Somewhere around there.
Okay, I'm gonna talk to Sayana. Let's do a story for the two of you. Can you two keep a story? If Alf, I'm not sure if you two are able to keep a lie going.
Do I have to lie to people?
You can also be silent and broody, because that is a trope that people understand.
I don't really know what a trope is, but I'll take your word for it.
It's like, never mind. You can be silent and broody. Okay, Martin. I'm gonna sort of pull Martin aside a bit. So, if it comes up, you were informants trying to figure out what Mathura was doing. That probably keeps people from, if people are anti-Mathura, that makes it less likely they're going to be harsh with you. And hopefully if they're pro-Mathura, we have committed ourselves enough against him at this point that I don't think it will do any additional harm. Does that work?
Fair enough. Depends who you talk to, whether or not they even care about him. Like, some folks care, some folks don't. It's kind of how it works.
Right. Just making sure we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fair enough.
You can do this.
By the way, at this point, the Tabaxi has noticed you and is sort of like, hello there. How goes your day?
Oh my god, they've noticed me. You can do this. Hello, I am Piatt. I'm new to town. We come from further south, and I was aware of a problem, and I don't know how to fix it as an outsider. So I thought I wanted to talk to some locals, and people directed me to you as a person in the know about work and about the community here, things like that.
Well, fair enough. If you care to do a walk and talk, does that work for you? There's a couple of other projects that I have to start getting to and restoring some sections of the temples and the murals, but if you'd like to join me for the walk and we can figure some things out.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Just sort of like starts like dusting their hands off, and it's like you notice the sandwich they've been eating is kind of coated in the same kind of like mineral material dust. They don't seem to have noticed at this point. They seem almost immune to it, and they're just like, all right. Cracks their neck, spins their tail around a little bit, and starts walking you off. Feel free to ask. I
imagine dusty hairballs. I'm gonna walk with them, but I'm gonna try to keep I'm gonna try to like stop talking whenever they're talking to somebody else, both to keep other people from listening in and also to give them space if they need to give an order or something.
Right. Yeah, it's sort of just being like, give respectful distance, respecting that they're also someone who's kind of and a lunch break / still kind of always at work because the city always kind of needs repairs. This is something you very quickly pick up on, is that like Sayana, she tends to, like, as she's talking to different people, you get the sense a lot of people seem to respect her, and a lot of people just from different walks of life as well. There you see some folks who are mainly like quilters or working with clothing and working with collecting. They're talking to Sayana about how to coordinate getting the dyes for certain materials and cultivating some of the flowers and such and fruits that are used to sort of gain those dyes. And she's a very calm kind of presence, but you get the sense this is someone who's like probably the equivalent of like a project coordinator, but for the architecture and planning of the city. Like, she has about 15 projects always going at once, but doesn't seem to show any strain or stress from it. But yeah, you can feel free to ask her any sort of questions. It'll be the same case with Gloria. If it's okay with you right now, I'll have that be where Baya's sort of set. So Bo and Baya, you have your individual like people that you've met up with. Feel free to take the next few minutes to think any major questions you want to ask them while I shift over to Didi and Azerlaf.
Sure thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, you two, northern section of the city, heading more towards a lot of the drow sort of area. And again, you saw individuals with half humanoid, half massive tarantula-like spider bodies that I think we might have already done a roll that out of character I can just say you see a lot of driders wandering around the streets and such.
But are they called driders or were they called something else?
You would know them as driders. Driders is not any sort of like derogatory term. And in here it's kind of here you might hear the term used for kind of a sillier sort of nickname reason, and that like someone might occasionally overhear as you're passing, because I think Azerlaf has a decent passive perception because cleric, and I think you have
13.
It's enough. It's not like people are like hiding their conversations as you're walking either. You just hear people occasionally directing others who need the help, pointing towards the spiders, and you hear the phrase driving spider. So drider is just sort of a nickname that became condensed for it. Because you actually see there are people there, some of the driders are being used not quite like a mount, but are helping ferry some people across different parts of the city. They're acting especially for folks who have either limited energy or limited mobility. There seems to be a very
Are they large?
robust and they are large.
Okay.
So they are taking up significant parts of the street. You do occasionally have to like dodge out of the way as a drider comes through and is like holding a staff and it's like, excuse me.
So are they large enough that we could walk under them, or is like no, they're just like taking up a lot. They're big.
Say that again?
Are they large enough? Like basically the tarantula bits kind of are like like their torso that's connected to the legs is like 6 foot off the ground, or is it just they're big?
They're very big. They're very wide.
Okay.
In the posterior region, they're very wide in that area. So I'll put it to you this way: when you're behind them, no one can see that you are behind them. That's how like wide and how much proportionally the aspect of their body is. But you're going through those aspects of the city. You come to, yes, the driving a spider blue-gray, and welcome to the silliness that is the stream. But you come to one of various stone buildings. This one is a little bit more intricate in its design. There's a couple of stories to it. Bless you.
Thank you.
And there are, as you walk in, because you chose to go for the textual-based history one, correct?
Yep.
As you walk in, very much a TARDIS kind of effect in that as you walk in, there is a massive, almost like dome interior kind of effect to what you're seeing around you. And it's just, Dee Dee, you've seen a lot of bookcases. The Ember Halls back in Backfire have rows upon rows of bookcases. This is on par with that level of books and material and knowledge. And you see various individuals. You see hobgoblins, you see goblins, you see shifters, you see an occasional orc and half-orc roaming through some of the different aisles, and they're just taking the time and just looking through it in there. And you just see them like furiously writing down notes, and then you occasionally hear like some banter happening between a couple folks that are like, it was 17th cycle, 3rd week, 6th day, and the other one's like, it was 16th cycle, 15th week, 3rd day. And they're just, it's like the equivalent of like two fandom nerds fighting with each other over the specific little bit of like info, where like to anyone around them no one gives a fuck, but to them they're like almost ready to throw blows. But they have 8 strength, so it doesn't land.
Prior to getting into the textural halls, as we're sort of going through the city, you notice that I'm taking a little bit of extra time trying to, like, I'm really getting distracted and kind of absorbing the city. Azerlath, are you sort of like making a beeline to the library, or are you also kind of like keeping pace?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a couple of times where you nearly lose me and grab me. And I seem to be in no particular hurry to come with you, but I am coming with you.
It probably doesn't help that some of those instances are probably prompted by a Drider going by, and then Azerlath, you're like, wait, where the fuck is Edie? Neither of you is like short, but also you're not as big as a Drider body, so
yeah.
No, not at all.
You're not that big. You're both relatively like skinny in frame, but yeah, you're able to walk through, and there is a front desk sort of like stone, kind of almost like raised dais kind of platform. It fits somewhere like think more our world's kind of like central library desk, where it's not quite like just one platform and then there's like things around it. It's like almost a full circle, sort of raised, kind of deep red orange crystalline volcanic rock kind of structure and design to it. And there is, let me pull up the description. There we go. You see a high elf there, but a little bit different than a lot of other high elves you probably would have seen growing up and living in Backfire. A lot of those tended to be a lot paler, the more classical, like very clean, elven, pointed face features of the most like lithe and beautiful of naturalistic forms. This one
fancy
is like
pants.
Yeah, very fancy pants. But this one is this is a very high elven in terms of sort of the very characteristic kind of like coloration to the eyes, and the hair is sort of in some ways kind of like a blondish and leading into almost strawberry blonde kind of end to it, but a little bit more muscly. Like this is this is a location of mostly book nerds, so no one is like quote unquote swole, but a little bit more of a fit
But
kind of frame.
Books get heavy.
Yeah, you
Books get
can.
heavy.
You could
There
you
are
could
some
have good
swole
biceps from carrying around books.
This
There
is
can be
Yeah, it depends
swole
on what kind of
nerds.
carts they have and what the ladders are like. No?
This is strangely defensive. Do you know a person with really large biceps in a library that is?
Look, I'm very dexterous, okay? So I could be swole.
I'm gonna have certain elements of that defensiveness lead into a moment of you both turn and you see several people are just mage handing huge stacks of books.
Hey, Mage Hand is only 5 pounds.
Hey, they might have an alteration of that spell. You know?
That's true. That is completely true.
That actually literally beat me to the punch as they were literally at this moment. Like, you see the hand is both bigger in some cases for people. Yes, it's not mage hand, it's mage biceps at this point. But you see this high elven individual, sort of blonde leading to strawberry blondish hair, the kind of off blue coloration to the eyes, relatively fit kind of build for a lot of folks who tend to frequent a lot of these places, and deep, actually kind of like almost reddish kind of brown skin, and just sort of peering over a couple of different tomes, and you see their eyes start to clear over just a little bit, just get a little bit foggier. But you also spot there's just tucked around their neck appears to be a necklace that has a black tarantula pressed against a background of a spider web with what looks like a little bit of 2 tiers along each of where like the main like eyeballs would be. Like, there's multiple eyes, but the main like center eyeballs in the holy symbol seem to have a set of tiers going down their face.
So the
And
weeping spider.
Wait, say that again?
I said, so it's like some weeping spider symbol.
Yes, and you can both feel free to roll a religion check to see what details you pick up. You probably already have a
Yeah, we're
strong
doing
sense
that.
of who it is. Yeah, not super high. It's not hard to pick out. You don't get too many details other than like this is definitely some variation of Lolth, which, as far as many of you might have grown up, you've heard varying tales depending on which ring of backfire the residents you were speaking to were talking about. Like, if you've ever heard merchants from the middle or upper rings come down to the lower rings and sort of talk about, like, in passing, Lolth. You've heard a lot of the traditional sort of derogatory accounts of Lolth betrayed Corellon. Lolth was a terrible influence on the whole of the elves. But I'll say with the 13 deity, that's just enough to know that, 1, a lot of these accounts are exaggerated. 2, a lot of these accounts ignore Corellon's own prejudices against aspects of his own elven kind that he created. And 3, also ignore a lot of what seems to be a very positive reception of Lolth in this region. There are a lot of drow you start to see after looking at the symbol who are also frequenting a lot of these sort of places. And among the bookshelves, there's just a few of them that look like they have a ring of lights that for a particularly dark section, because it's still relatively afternoon, but some sections the sun is not hitting very properly. You see a couple of them are just sort of doing this kind of gesture while they're leaning over a book. They're just like floating a ring of lights around them, and they're just like peering through a book, and occasionally someone like will pass by, bump into them, the lights will stop, and they'll like raise a fist at them in anger, and then they'll have to like utter a couple words and they start it again.
So there's like natural lighting skylights, and then it's sort of
yeah, there's elements where the sun is kind of coming in through some of the natural lighting, but it's more like through windows or open spaces in the design of the building. It's like it's just thin enough where light can go through. But again, this whole space, to be clear, is very magical. Like, just by the size alone and every aspect of how people are roaming around through the hall, through all the bookshelves and like these archives, this is a very magically rich spot. And the high elven individual is just sort of just standing there, just looking through different things, eyes occasionally clouding over, and then continuing their work.
And I sort of look at Azerlap and say, you're good at all of these things. You seem to know how to gain access. I mean, I could use my first kiln badge, but I'm not sure they're as well known up here. Also, I was like a freshman, so I'm sure this is already expired magically. And I pull up this little like metal badge.
All right. Well, before we go bother them, what specifically do we want to look for?
I kind of want to at least cover my bases and see what I know about the history of the first smothering. Just to make sure that we're not missing anything obvious. I mean, see what's there?
God damn it, Anne.
All right. So, I go up to, I assume, the librarian or whoever's working the front desk, and say hello.
Seemed just the same sort of almost stereotypical like elven sort of daintiness, but like you hear like a loud like not quite a pop, but just a very loud crack, and you just hear them go, "Ow!" Okay, I really have to stop trying to do that. Hello.
Hello. I am a cleric in service to Denier, and my friend and I here were looking for, probably first for information about the first smothering, historical information.
Ah. So you're interested in looking in deep into our continent's history.
Yes.
I cannot of my own accord provide you with the best references, but I may know someone who can provide some things, and I can at the very least with my own specialty give you some sense of some of the artistic works influence that might have documented the smothering incident as well.
Oh yes, that's a very important way to look at the history.
I'm with them.
Yes. They're with me. Yes, but artistic primary sources are very important. Though I think my friend here is more versed in academic text.
I was at the first kiln.
A far wanderer, it seems. I do hope the first kiln has not spoiled you for proper attempts at looking into history. They seem to value textual-based accounts a little bit more than some of the more first-hand accounts that we have here among our historians.
Well, they're kind of... My understanding is that this is a hotbed of world... players having trouble with the word, but it's like world important events, and first kiln, well, they weren't really close to a lot of the action here, so I don't expect them to have first-hand accounts, which is why I'm here with my friend.
This is a sign that you have thankfully not been spoiled too much by the first kiln. Hello, Thunder. It's very loud. Let it be known that we may actually have some individuals amongst our communities who may have lived through some aspect, who may have perhaps not lived through the first smothering, but recall some of the first generations that followed from the first smothering, and do recall even some of the initial days of the second smothering's onset, the area upon which we are currently in. If you would like to speak with them, I can give you some directions for who to speak with, but if you are more interested in the textual side of things first, I would be more than happy to help you. Oh, and before I continue, my apologies, my manners. My name is, and you hear just another kind of loud crack, and they're like, bad shoulder. My name is Rosa Erwin.
My name is Sarla, and this is Didi.
Charmed to meet both of you. You seem absolutely delightful, and with a rather helpful and healthy zeal for knowledge as well.
Yes, well, I would certainly like to actually speak with some primary sources, but since we're already here, we may as well look into the information here as well.
Also, do you do any scribing spell services? Because unfortunately, due to circumstances, I had to, let's just say, have some distant continuing learning services, so I'm always in the lookout for new spells to add to my book.
Dear, if you were kicked out of the academy or left for some personal reasons, I do not judge. This is a land of many who have been displaced, and many of us here did not always find home in Chantico. If you require knowledge, we will offer it to you as best we can. That is the nature of my work.
'Cause right now I just have this, and I pull out the joke book. And let's just say it's been useful, but mostly a gamble.
May I take a look?
Yes.
And I pass the book.
Let's see. I recall this. Oh.
And then I show them my scribe book. I show them my scribe book, which is like, at this point, I think it's 60% the joke spells.
Yeah, and you see them peering through it. It's like, delightful penmanship. You seem to have an knack for. I see divination. I see divination, evocation, abjuration. You seem quite, for someone who appears to be quite young, you seem quite versed in many schools of magic. Must be quite the student and quite the talented ones at that.
Well, my professors kind of said that I was being, let's just say, not applying myself to a specialization, but really, I kind of liked everything. I just want to learn everything.
Oh, I imagine they referred to you as indecisive.
Yeah, that's the word.
Oh, pish posh. Many of them didn't think I would go on to do anything significant in my field either. So, don't worry about them. They don't know any better. But, these translations. Like, not looking at your particular scribe translations, but looking at what the original text was to transcribe from. Is this... you see them sort of like bend down and start pulling open sort of like a stone drawer where they pull out a personalized notebook and they flip through it. Well, I'll be damned. Seem to have actually found one.
Found one of what?
So it's a rather trivial magic item. This is one of several books actually, done by a rather cheeky wizard of old by the name of Felicitas. He's been known to attempt to create his own spells and documented on the historical record as having failed tremendously. Hence and they sort of like look up at you and they have the cringe face of someone who's like, oh baby, you tried so hard in terms of the work of like the transcription. It's like, I think you have enough exposure with this to know that he wasn't very good.
Well, when you're on the road and no longer a part of an academy because you had to leave for family reasons, I make do with what I have. And, it's the first time we came to a major city where might be able to find some spells to scribe, but I will say I don't have much in the way of coin. However, I can supply my own inks, and I pull out the little plant.
I have not seen one of these since I lived as a young child in the Underdark. Let me take a look. Sort of just like a little bit more animated than they've been before. Like they were already kind of excited to like be helping someone, but they start looking at the plant and it's like, magical ink as well on top of that. Tell you what, I will give you access to scribing services for 2 days if you will let me hold on to this plant and see if we can cultivate some in the local area. It will not take very long, I promise. The plant will be returned to you, but
Sure.
This would help some of the scribes and some of the cartographers as well who would like to leave an additional message or two about not a bugbear, an owlbear horde and such that's in the area. Occasionally you can't quite do as much with the map and you kind of have to add a little bit of extra notes in your own records. This might be more helpful for doing that.
I pull out some of my vials where I didn't use all of them and I say, are these any good? I'm not quite sure if I've harvested them well. They seem to work just fine when I scribe them, but I don't know.
You see them cast what to you is dancing lights, but it seems to be the color is not quite red, the red or vibrant sort of yellows that most dancing lights have. Theirs seems to be almost kind of like a fungal like shades of color, like almost like think of it as very much an Underdark influence dancing lights. And they're like, let me see, and the ink reacts very vividly to the dancing lights variation. Aha. Oh no, you're doing just fine. Thumbs on the road, you say. Whoever you purchase this from must be quite a curious traveler. But in any case, we can provide you scribing services, and to not waste any more of your time, sort of turns in the direction of Azerla. What do you require? You both have access to the libraries, and I will give you a name or two for any additional first-hand sources. Whatever you would like to look into. I cannot promise 100% success for what you might find, but I hear, and they essentially like think Dewey Decimal System sort of catalog. They pull out like two like. I'll put you this way: to anyone else that isn't a Zerlath and DD, these are like giant, like the tomes are like this huge of reference material of like where things might be located in the library. But for the two of you, this is like a freshman intro course level of like reference guide. It's just like,
Is it like a card catalog or is it a book?
Basically, it helps. It separates out different eras because the way sort of history kind of works in here in terms of how it's documented, because this is something that both of you would know, is that the historical timeline follows in terms of cycles. So the current era that you're in is referred to as the stalled 15th kindling, because kindling sort of represents the start of a new rebirth cycle when Ignis would fall to the earth. Well,
yeah, but is it like a card catalog or is it in a book?
It is in a book that will magically flip from the first to each subsection of sub-historical event within each kindling era. The reason I was explaining that is that you have to look at the sort of table of contents, which in and of itself is a few pages long, and then when you indicate the right spot, it will automatically go to the correct page.
So it's like a hyperlink.
Yeah.
Basically, it is an arcane hyperlink.
And then when there's new stuff, they can insert it in the middle instead of having to put it on the end like a bullet journal or something.
It's an extra dimensional arcane book with hyperlinks. I love it.
This is what you get in my campaigns. Occasionally you get combat. Most of it is new.
Trying to specify like what type of classification, like physical system they're using.
Yeah, this is kind of what I signed up for, especially for this session to open up. I figured this is going to be very much y'all are investigating around the area kind of session. But yeah, Rosa Erwin gives you that and sort of points to, depending on what subject you want to look into, we'll point to the section of the book that you might find more information on. I know Didi, you said for smothering, and Azerlath, you're looking for primary sources. I would like you both to either roll me Arcana or History, and then also roll an investigation. The Arcana or History will tell you how well you are at discerning the finer details of what you find in your investigation check. It will add a modifier that I will not tell you what it is, but it will amplify that depending on what you roll.
And I will use my advantage for my investigation.
Okay.
Which is good that I did that.
All right, so Azerlath, you will get a significant amount of information. Didi, you will get a lot of information, even with your low investigation. The modifier was essentially, if you rolled high enough on Arcana or History, it would need to be at least a 16. You would get a plus 4 to your other roll. So because you've done that, you both roll high enough to get information now. What specific questions would you like answered, as you have done well enough in your investigation to start getting some answers to whatever questions you have or whatever you're interested in looking into? So.
Do you want to go first,
my philosophy is to let the source guide what they think is important, which is in itself important. So I might ask guiding questions from that, but generally I let them take the lead first.
Okay, so when you're saying let the source guide you, do you mean the textual stuff you're looking at right now, or are you already trying to look and talk to
Oh, okay. I didn't realize.
primary sources? That's what I'm asking for
Yeah,
clarification. Because right now you're in the textual part of it.
Okay.
You can be directed over to the community area where you could get other primary sources. There are some primary sources here. Rose's expertise will just give you more in the direction of art history related stuff, because that is their area of focus. And Dee, because you rolled so high, you rolled God tier on your.
I have a plus 11 as a lore wizard because any knowledge check I am proficient in, I am expertise in.
Lore wizards are strong. I love it. That's the nerd. That's the strongest nerd subclass you can get. Past knowledge, or they're pretty on par. But you will get whatever questions you would like to ask about the first smothering. Rosa will be able to direct you to some sections of the oldest historical text to reference, but it just depends what either of you will want to ask. Because after I answer your questions, if you want to move over to the primary sources, I can leave that as the point we end with for y'all, and then head back to the other two.
Yeah. Okay, so if I'm still in the library, then I would check the progression of the art made after the first smothering, so see what it's like at the begin, right afterwards, and then see how that the view of it changes over time.
Okay, so to answer that one, a lot of what you're seeing, you see various indications. There's occasionally, it's not quite like 3D design of them, but some of these historical texts have been enchanted to include almost think a projected image holographic display of what some of the text, some of the artistic works of those time periods would have been like. Mm-hmm. You see a lot of depictions of celestials of various kinds that typically when the first smothering was going to kick off, it originally started with 4 gods. Zahir, Grumsh, Asmodeus, and Orcus. Orcus in this world tends to be treated almost on par with the level of a deity, and is referred to more as the Lord of Undeath. And each of these, they have titles. They attempted at one point to rise up against the divine bird, to literally smother the power and force of the phoenix. But they failed in these attempts, but much of the time that happened afterwards, you saw that you can see with a lot of the artwork that's being depicted, were various kind of small scale, not quite wars, but at least very bloody conflicts between celestials of various bents, of various deities and gods. That these were just sort of at a point, a manifestation of their will and their conflicting emotions in response to that attempt made on essentially their parents' life, because it is from Ignis that all gods were originally born. So you see this depicted in the artworks, and eventually you reach a point where it's like the artwork just sort of splits off into multiple accounts of paintings, textiles, artworks, songs, poems, and other various sources of that kind, where you see a lot of think of an evolutionary kind of tree where it's sort of having a line and then there's various branches that break off at different points. Now think that take that to the 30th power in terms of how far it spreads off, because for all of the different sub-races and races that you see, the various gods that, following the first smothering, gained the power to create life for themselves and had their divine will manifest relative to their creation's faith. That's how many branches started to spread out. With the gods gaining the ability from Ignis to create their own life, it was very much a case of, hey, a very angry parent saying, you think it's easy raising kids? Go at it. Just deal with it. And then it sort of just, for lack of better phrasing, fucked off to its own sort of realm, and its body falling to the prime material plane would be sort of a mark of, this will be a point then all of you gods can go talk to your kids every end of the cycle. This will be a point in which all of you have to actually deal with communicating with your followers in some way. And you see, again, the artworks depict various accounts of these. You see stories, poems, artworks like quilted patterns that tell full histories, and these are like across various languages. But I think you or Dee Dee has comprehend languages, so
I
you could.
have it as a ritual, so before I dive into it, I spend about 11 minutes just casting it on myself. And if Azerlath wants me, like, I will assist while you're doing your research as well as mine for, like, languages you're not familiar with. You could just come and ask me, like, hey, what does this mean? And I'll just read it out loud. And I'll keep recasting it each time, like
Yeah,
ritual.
Yeah, but yeah, you get a lot of those different accounts, and you get a lot. You get to see, this is like, again, these are hundreds and hundreds of years of history. So even in just a few hours you have, even being what I imagine Zerlath as a speed reader, I'm just gonna take that as a base assumption as part of your personality, it's because nerd.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of material, so at some points it's just kind of like skimming through, finding the most significant. But that's a lot of the biggest.
Anyway.
Yeah. But that's a lot of the big things, at least post first smothering, is the artwork and art history seems to detail a lot of those sorts of events. And also a lot of other significant historical events. You see certain artworks and songs telling of the bloody conflict between Tiamat and her brother Bahamut over the status of what Dragonborn would have in this world. You see the difficulties of tieflings in response to the tiefling rebellions that happened when Asmodeus tried to literally create separate planes and his own races to artificially boost his power. And then that just blew up in his face when several tiefling, like, whole battalions rebelled against him to win their own freedom. Like, you see these in like secondhand accounts, you see these in firsthand like pieces that are like, if you've ever looked at like think the amount of detail that like a Hieronymus Bosch painting kind of has in terms of like, this is a picture of paradise, think that level of detail. But for these historical events, these are just various artists of different bents. You see drow, shifters, goblins, like hobgoblins, you see Asimars, you see tieflings, like various people, and it's a lot of info. But something that does stand out even past that is that in relation to more recent historical research and documentation regarding this era you're in now, the second smothering, this era was said to have been kicked off when the two divine messengers of gods who were either punished or rewarded for preventing Ignis from being smothered came to the prime material plane, normally as heralds for the next cycle. They arrived as angels, sickly, dying, and slowly passed away. There's this theme, essentially, that from all of this, that the arrival of an angel tends to precipitate either a great calamity or a significant shift in what happens in the world. And there are accounts occasionally, this is the last bit that Azerlath will get before I can switch over to Dee Dee, and then when we get back, because we're going to be having to take a break soon, I will get back into Bo and Baya. The last thing you see is occasional accounts given by some in some of the poetry. They'd speak of a shadowy figure of the night and said to have been a being that long aspired to be the master of secrets, who was given the title of the Whispered One, and that this was a phrase that was uttered by the angel when you confronted them, by the planetar, when you were down in the well. You have no real knowledge of what that means beyond that point. If you would like to roll either history or arcana, you can, to see if you could recall anything else if you've been trained, but outside of that, that's what you have. Again, this is a lot of me talking. Apologies to my players for all of this lore dump, but this is, you're looking into major events right now. It's a lot of stuff to go through. But yeah, Dee Dee, you would probably, that covers, I think, a lot of your information as well. But if there are any other additional questions you wanted to ask about that, you can feel free to.
Aside from sort of seeing similar things, what I would like to focus on or see if I can find any clues or anything is more of a, what are the small little things? What are sort of the slow burns? What were the indicators of the betrayer gods or the followers or whatever that led to the betrayer gods being able to even do something in the first smothering. Like, the reason why I asked that question is to see if there's any parallels between what's going on in our era.
It would seem as though the only way something could reach that level is either faith was broken to a certain extent in the divine being, or enough power was combined from the individual ones to rebel against some of the basic tenets of what it means for Ignis to exist in the world. Because there are notions of, I'll put it to you this way, if for anyone who's seen the film Dogma, I think there's aspects of that. Spoilers if you haven't watched Dogma, sorry. It's an old film.
Not old, it's like 20 years old.
It's been 20 years old. If you haven't watched it, it's on you.
Sorry. But essentially there's sort of a theme in there where I believe like roughly the summary of that conversation goes like, if you violate a tenant condition of the world, the idea that like you break against God's will, you effectively end the universe. Think that similar kind of logic happens, and you get the sense, and I'm going to give this to you because that was a 26 on history. Much of the beginnings of this came from the first smotherings incident, from these notions of Orcus violating life's natural cycle. Because you look into different accounts about life, death, about how rebirth even plays a role in this world, and that you come to realize for all souls, as these are sort of some of the base tenets of what it means to be a being in this world, all souls have two fragments of Ignis's divine spirit within them. And this, in a way, is both a literal and metaphorical representation of when Ignis first began to create life. They split their spirit into two, and the second piece of them slowly split down into what all other beings were. For someone like Orcus to taint that tenant, for someone like Asmodeus to begin to take delight in these notions of harm and pain, for Zahir to speak to aspects of torture and poisoning, for Grumsh to sort of take these notions of violence and direct wanton destruction to absurd degrees, these reached a point of almost violating the basic tenets of what Ignis as a being set down as what it means to be in the world. So in that sense, the first smothering was precipitated by that. But the second one, it's a lot of conflicting accounts, but with the way that sort of the whole of the sort of rule book works now, any divine being could, in theory, from what you see across and this is like, mind you, this is like 4, 5, 6 hours of research doing into this, and you're like going through a couple of big, thick, heavy tomes, and it's like, okay, I have this lead, fuck, I looked up the wrong name, I have this lead, damn it ends right here. It's a lot of conflicting accounts, but you get the sense that there is, in theory, a possibility that the Divine One's power could be restricted, or could have been altered or withheld to a certain degree if a certain level of faith or lack of faith happened in the correct direction. If someone, let's say, of a high position lost their faith in the divine being itself, it's in a way had to try and play by some of the same rules with the gods. Ignis is just tended to treat all of its creations as like, it's a baseline. I created you, so maybe cool, believe in me because I created the whole of reality, but that doesn't necessarily follow for everyone.
And does any of this ring something for me in regards to what my family's doing or what my family's involved in?
You could see a lot of significant parallels for something like, I'll say it just straight out, like something like Sun Wukong, or something demonic or fiendish to be attempting a rise to power of any kind. It's not quite zero-sum game, but it's very much one of those things where faith being broken, there's an element of devotion and love that's involved with faith. And in the sort of way that me saying out of character to tell you my design for this world is also like faith plays a huge part in the strength of a being. It plays a huge part in the strength of a deity or a god. So for a being like Sun Wukong or other fiendish figure to begin ascending to the point of a deity would mean a diversion of power away from other deities potentially, or maybe even the divine bird themselves.
So PACs could add to that.
PACs could very well. The thing about many of these PACs that you would also read, because I imagine that's a little bit of the inkling of the research you're looking into as well.
Mm-hmm.
They are never really designed for the one who has made the pact, willingly or not, to ever really win out in that bargain. It's very rare that at the very least a fiendish pact ends well for them. And also that their souls are meant to sort of be, in a way, offerings of how Ignis's power are, because again, and this is sort of something to establish with players at this point, and also for viewers to know about like how resurrection might work in this campaign. This is something I wanted to introduce once the narrative allowed for it. You have two pieces of Ignis within you. Once those are gone, the lifeblood and the lifeline that connects you as a being in the world fades. So essentially what that means is you have two chances to be revived, and after that second resurrection, that life you have, that is your last life. It's in a way, it's a function of all life ultimately returns to the source, or in a way has to go back into the whole of creation.
So you lose a piece of yourself, or you lose one of those shards each time you get resurrected?
Yes.
Okay.
It's why resurrection very much is not an easy thing to do in the world. And it can be done. Like the ease with which something like out of character revivify might happen, those conditions will still apply. And there are other aspects you can introduce to make it easier to make that process happen more cleanly. But no matter what, each resurrection takes a piece of the flame of life within you. And it slowly returns it back to in a way to the continent, but also in a way to the source. And that's probably, as a last note, what's the most striking and unsettling thing about all of this is that for something like the divine bird to be held back, God damn it, Ant. Yes, you start with 2 Horcruxes, everybody. How this works. You start, for something like the divine bird to be restricted, to be held back, is also a strain on the nature of the continent and life on the continent itself. Because the bird, the divine rock, is very much the actual life essence of the continent. For it to no longer be happening in the way that it does in the cycle is in a way to slowly drain the life out of the continent, which, depending on what deity or fiendish influence you might have, could very well lead to another being taking all of that energy, perhaps even to rise to the level of godhood.
So I have one last question, which you're free to tell me is another research project to do on another day. But reading all of that, the first thing my mind comes into is that, well, what happens if you have a shard? Could you give it to someone to sort of essentially give them one more life? It's okay if the answer is that's another research project.
God damn it, walnut mushrooms. God damn it, ants. I will tell you this. Roll me an Arcana check. This will be an extremely high DC. That it's not impossible. Unfortunately, that is not enough. I'll tell you out of character, it was a 25 DC to reach it. You don't know. You know that these shards are the very essence and lifeblood of a divine being. They could go to many magnificent things. They could do many terrible things.
I look at my staff as I'm sort of thinking about this.
Yeah, but all you know for certain with all of this research between the two of you is the following. angels tended to precede the arrival of some great big events, the lifeblood of the continent is being drained. And whatever is coming, whatever has held up the divine bird, is probably quite dangerous, or at the very least is using it for purposes that very likely are not for the benefit of anyone else. And with that very cheery note, we are actually going to be going to break. As it is 9 o'clock right now, so we're going to take our 10-minute break, everyone. Before we head out, going to give another shout out to all the folks who have already been engaging with us in chat, making jokes, subbing, rating us earlier. We love you. Another shout out to our amazing Roll20 sponsor. Thank you. If you have any interest in getting involved and signing up for your free account today, head over to roll20.net/start/WTTP. Sign up. You have modules, we have maps, and we have many resources that our players make use of in this campaign itself. So, with that being the case, we're going to transition over to our break. We hope to see you in 10 minutes, everybody. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us today. If you get a second during break, you should check out one of our amazing sponsors. We're now proudly sponsored by Roll20, the best virtual tabletop for all your role-playing needs. Over 4 million people use Roll20's virtual tabletop to power their favorite games. And with more modules than you can shake a stick at on their new revamped storefront, you'll definitely find something for your group to enjoy. Sign up today by clicking the link below or heading to roll20.net/start/WTTP. Tabletop Loot is an amazing place to get your dice bags, dice boxes, and more. And now you can get 15% off your purchase at tabletoploot.com by using the code WTTPDICE at checkout. Tabletop Loot. Your party starts here. While you're at it, check out our so awesome merch store, So Nerdware. So Nerdware is the place to find all your Welcome to the Party merch and other amazing stuff too. Head on over to sonerdware.com and use the code WELCOME at checkout to get 10% off your next purchase. So Nerdware. It's what the nerds wear. Devin Rue, the amazing mistress of maps, has kindly supported the channel since the beginning and provides graphics for many of our streams. Head on over to rueinc.com to check out some of the best fantasy cartography on the web. Our Patreon supports the creators and producers of the channel by providing Roll20 subscriptions, cost coverage for video hosting, and more. If you want to support the channel while getting podcasts a week early, gaming articles that are published on Patreon first, a shout out during our break, and more, head on over to patreon.com/welcomepartyrpg and throw us a buck or $5. And last, but certainly not least, help out the party. Subs and bits not only support the stream, but also every 500 bits or a tier 1 sub gives a player or DM of your choice a reroll or system equivalent, and every 1000 bits or tier 2 sub gives a player or DM of your choice a crit or system equivalent. Thanks again for hanging out with us today. The game will be back in just a few minutes.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
And we're back.
Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us again at this wonderful hour as our crew of all POC folk playing D&D 5e is getting back into it. So we left off at essentially discovery of phenomenal cosmic proportions being found by our resident lore master wizard and our knowledge cleric fire genasi friend here. But we're going to take back over with all this research having been done and a lot of lore dump on my end, back to Bo and Baya. So I'm going to go with Bo first. So Bo, you were walking along with this Goliath cleric of Cord, who seems to be taking you off to some regions a bit on the outsides of the city. You see there, you come to a stop at a certain point where it's just sort of open terrain and ground, this sort of leftover volcanic rock layer of red, orange, and like emanating heat. That there's nothing there that seems to be blocking your passage, but the priest seems to at one point stop. He does a couple of like gestures in the air, and you see just this very thin sheen of energy just part, and you're able to make it to what is essentially a massive quarry on the outside of the city, where you see various folk of different races and such involved with mining different materials that you recognize as bits of jade, limestone, and onyx, and that there appear to be an occasional there's an individual or two who also appears to be gesturing with a staff or just waving their hands around and slowly erupting the earth in one section or carving through some of the stone in other parts. And they seem to be just all excitedly chatting with each other. And this is going on like it's a very intense, heavy physical labor. And yeah, this is what you see as you arrive. The cleric, during this time as you're walking over, if you have anything you want to ask her, now's the time.
Yeah, Bo is really curious about this whole Cord thing and the fighting connection to it. Like, she totally gets like just wanting to have a well moderated bout of fisticuffs every once in a while to let off some aggression and steam, but like this seems like really like the fighting thing seems way too much of an aspect of worshiping Cord to these people, and she's curious about that strong connection. So she says to Gloria, so what about this fight club that's going on? Why is that so important to followers of Cord, or at least the ones that are here?
We get that question more than you'd think. In actuality, perhaps it's not always the best example for what faith is in the region, as some of the more overenthusiastic of the priests and acolytes and newly joined to the faith try and advertise, as they try and refer to it, about Cord is about glory and combat and all of this pizzazz and all of that. I'm sure you've seen some of our combat officiators and been exposed to their personalities.
Yeah, I mean, it was I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of fun participating in that fight yesterday, but it just seems, to me, it seems odd. Like, is that a prerequisite to worship Cord?
No, it is in many ways. People, some of our more overzealous acolytes would like you to think that, but no. In reality, we train as we do. Many of us who are living here now, we train as we do because it is one of the most direct paths we have to show our devotion to Cord. We train not so much just for spectacle, because that is in many ways the antithesis of what combat is for us. We train for the purposes of protection. We train to better ourselves, to better each other, to create a context in which we feel safe and able to know that we have each other's backs, whether it's in mind, in body, or in spirit. Cord is not a deity of, how shall we put it, subtlety. Cord is very much one who their presence is felt in the direct, in the sometimes perhaps overzealous visceral. But in reality, the combat is not simply just for us to expose blood, for us to open wounds upon one another, for it's simple to do that kind of thing. We smith, we craft, we work to perfect our art in the way that anyone else does. No one bats an eye when a painter works many days of their life to create the perfect piece, or even the imperfect pieces that slowly lead to some magical, wonderful discovery. We think of our work with each other and building community here as the same. We practice, not to harm, at least, nothing too severe. Chuckles, but no, to protect.
Is there a real need here for protection? Like,
No.
It sounds like you're like a militia.
No. We're not trained for more than just it is how many of us see the divine in our everyday. And also, she stops for a moment, sort of just pausing, and you see as she pulls back her from underneath the robe she has, you see just multiple tattoos, but many of them seem to be in like a scarred like pattern all across her skin. When you look upon me, what do you expect? What do you think I have experienced?
Well, it definitely seems like you've had some hardships. But everybody's got scars. I've got scars.
Right. But I don't see you as a brute. I don't see you as feral or any other derogatory term simply because you have those issues, those experiences you've had. I don't question whether or not you are ready to fight at any moment should you think you are on edge or need to do so. It is much the same for those who are here. It is not paranoia, it is not a longing for violence, but that is not what Cord represents to many of us. It is a sense that we have all lived through hardships. We have lived through terrible things. Many of us, and sort of indicates towards a section of the quarry, you see there's a small contingent of drow, and there's some shifters who don't really... I'll put it to you this way, they don't pass as humanoid whatsoever. Mm-hmm. It's very clearly like the animalistic features are more apparent than might be in your case.
Right.
Many of us have not had in our lives the luxury of, in some ways, having an easy life. And in the years that followed the calamity, when the second smothering began, many of us wondered, we pondered, we worried, we stressed over many questions. Is the divine bird gone? Is the connection that we've had to gods gone? For many of us who have faith, we lost our connection in its purest form to our gods. And in some ways, many of us still worry if we've lost it all the way. But we have devoted ourselves to what we can here, to honor that which seems trivial. Why would we fight each other when there is no need for it? Why would we practice for something that may never come? The answer is we've had to be ready our whole lives. We've never had the chance to just stop and not be ready, or the luxury to experience what happens when we're not prepared.
Does the name Mathurin mean anything to you?
He's a zealot, if ever there was one. I'm not very old, I'll put that down. Although you get the impression they do actually have she has quite a bit of years on her, despite her saying that.
Okay.
But compared to some of the halfling folk, some of the elven folk, some of the drow and such, I have not had many years, but many of them, they've seen a zealot come and go. They've seen one spout about what the true path is, we very much tried not to give him that much mind. We've tried our best to not treat him seriously until something of significance arrives. For, again, I've chatted with several drow acolytes of Kord and of Lolth and Vondria as well. Many of them have told me the same thing. Would you give that much attention to every odd drunkard that comes into a tavern and spouts about being the strongest individual? Probably not.
Well, I mean, he is recruiting followers in the name of the same God that you claim to revere. And I guess it seems odd to me that you dismiss him like that.
I would like you to roll me an insight check.
Okay. Let's see if my internet is working.
If need be, I can also roll the check for you in the event that it's not working. Just let me know.
Insight. Here we go. That go through?
Let's see. So far, still seeing Dee Dee's near God tier Arcana check.
Yeah.
If you want, I can give it another go.
Yeah, can you do it for me?
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
Oh, wait, it did go through. Those are both pretty good.
That's gonna count that as pretty good, I'm gonna say.
I'm very insightful.
At least today you are. You get the sense while she responds to you by saying, we're not looking into this that much. We prefer, like, she's giving the impression that it's like, we'll handle it when it becomes an issue, but there's an element to just her movement. It's just very subtle, but you get the sense that's probably not the case. There's probably something where you don't know what exactly it is, but she's holding back on saying something about that. Like she's trying to downplay the idea that she's not involved or that there isn't anyone responding to it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna let that go for now. I don't want to antagonize Gloria at this point, but like Bo's gonna file that away to tell everybody else when they all meet back up later.
All right.
Yeah, and then I guess she's probably just going to ask more about like what they're doing at this quarry and how Bo can somehow contribute here.
Yeah, she will be able to tell you that she is the head of, like, you will get a sense from talking with her throughout the day that she has a particular forge-based approach to how she expresses her faith, hence the particulars to the symbol, the holy symbol of Kord that she wears. But that there are various druids of the Circle of the Land druids, there are various diviners, and that there are just general laborers who all work sort of in tandem with one another to help excavate out some of the lands, and then the druids take the time per the sort of advice and appraisal and sort of judgment of others who have been either longer established with the land and living here, or just with some of the other diviners who like have almost like minor moments of seeing into the future where there's a sense of like, don't put it there, big massive crop, terrible thing happens, don't put it there, flood, really don't put it over there, you don't even want to know what happens over there. But there's like carts, there's different little bits of arcane magic that's being done to create little bits, and there's Actually, you'll notice that there's some of the workers, some of the ones who are doing the actual physical labor, will occasionally, once they've properly sort of like flattened out a section of it and dug out some of the land around here, will hold up little bits of quartz crystal, and they'll like clink it, a pair of them with each other, and then they will immediately dart out of the way, and you hear bursting out of the ground spiders, like giant spiders, that using the quartz crystals, the workers work in tandem with the spiders to help finish doing the proper carving out of the ground to set it aside either for crops, for getting materials for what you overhear from a lot of conversations, arcane casting and druidic spell work. This is very much like a foundational site for people, like getting the materials for either rebuilding and touching up courtyards or architecture around the area, or just creating base materials for arcane practices. And the spiders seem to be a natural influence that they've harnessed using what sounds like almost vibrational frequencies caused by the crystals themselves. It is very alarming to just see giant spiders just pop out of the earth doing that.
Absolutely.
But if it's all right, I will probably at this point transition over to Fenya.
Yep.
That works. But I will say the last thing you see is coming out of the ground riding one of the spiders is the Tabaxi berserker you fought the previous
Of course.
Just sort of like taking the most direct approach possible of direct approaches. Perhaps to the point where it's being like, this is super excessive and not necessary, but he's just like...
I mean, yeah, they were a little bit showy, so totally expected.
But yeah, it's very much a case of like, there's a lot of like just direct physical labor here of working with the druids, with everyone that you can become involved with through the day.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Yeah.
So, as we're walking, I guess for the sake of expedience, can I narrate in third person what I sort of want to convey rather than playing it out in first person?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
If that works, if that's what you would like to do, we can do it that way.
Yeah, I think mostly for expedience, because the conversation it would take for me to like get to the point in character is very long.
In character, this is 3 hours of conversation truncated to a couple of minutes. The first hour and a half of like getting to the point.
Right. I'm also fine if at some point you think about the time involved and just say, you know, they're tired of talking. You have to leave. That's fine too. But so my first thing I want to convey, we as a group have heard about Mathurin's reach through an informant. Present Martin. And we've heard of tensions from locals and that they've cultivated sort of this dislike of immigrants over time. And I particularly want to emphasize they've even gone so far as to hire folks explicitly to dispose of outsiders, helpfully discovered by my informant here. We've also heard about the similar information about hiring policies from Fenya, one of the more well-known proprietors and seemingly respected proprietors of town, especially for outsiders. But basically, we've heard from an informant, some locals responding to outsiders explicitly, and somebody who is known for taking care of outsiders. I'm curious how a quote-unquote insider, who mostly deals with the city's workings, sees this picture. Not necessarily like, is this true or false, but just, I want more sources than just those two.
So you're looking to get a sense of like, what is like, how happy are the workers, or like folks who are involved in doing different work around the area, or what is the sort of key takeaway you're looking for?
I want Sayana's hot take on Mathura, basically. But I want to previously like preface that with what I already think I know and say,
okay.
But this is all hearsay, and the more points of info I have, the more accurate. I'm still skeptical of some of the things I've heard.
Okay. I would like you to also roll me an insight check.
Okay.
Just to give you a sense of how you might look at this whole conversation. That'll do it. Okay. That is a crit. So there's an element, I will say, preface all of what I'm about to say with, you get the sense there is an element of guardedness to Sayana's, what they convey to you, but the gist of what Sayana tells you is that, yeah, she's been hearing rumblings from sort of one of the older quadrants of more established sort of, let's say, dwarven, elf, and gnomish sort of background, where they have indicated unhappiness with the way things are done in the city. It's very much from an angle of like their Sayana's take very much is like they're old farts who feel like they want to go back to a way of doing the world that isn't, one, probably never existed, and two, isn't possible anymore with the kind of communities they have here now. There's this sense of like longing where like they were that many of them, with how outsiders have been treated, with migrant communities that have arrived in the region, a lot of them have this response in this quadrant of like, we remember this place before drow, before shifters, before more halflings came in. It used to be a lot, in their minds, nicer. And so sort of more outsiders coming in is not being met amongst some of the older workers per se with happiness. And so there are some among that subset of community members that seem to be leaning towards Mathura's particular teachings. Sayana's personal take on Mathura is possibly a liability or a threat to the community, but doesn't know she's not per se like a warrior class person, or like she's not a warrior archetype figure in the city. She's just someone who helps plan and try and take care of the happiness of the workers and such. And there's certain elements where like if there's dissatisfaction happening among some residents here, some of it is on grounds that like if she's sort of one of the point people and coordinator, she can't, I'll put it to you this way, she can't have everyone being happy when some of the base conditions for happiness for some people in the group project are effectively racism. Like that's a way if I can put it to you. Like she can't actually like make it so that like the old farts are happy about the situation when they're like, we want to go back to before this. And I'm like, whole sections of your region are designed by the drow now, or you've like been integral to establishing this place to what it is now.
Right.
So that's sort of the take you get from all of this.
Would you say one aspect of it might be charitably called rose-tinted glasses of the past?
Yes, that there's a sense that what you get, and this is like probably a couple of hours of conversation with her through different stops and such, and like her being at some points direct and her just asking clarifying questions.
Sure.
But yeah, you definitely get that sense. You very much get the sense of, especially because you rolled a crit on insight, and this is very genuine. These are not anything she's being guarded about. The only element that like she seems to have an element of like uneasiness is if you were to ask her something like, well, what are you doing about Mathura in that case if you're worried about him? She says outright,
I actually won't go in that direction at all.
Okay, just checking.
So yeah, that wouldn't even come up.
Okay, then I will ignore that part of it.
Okay.
But
so
you do get a sense this is all her genuine feelings from that crit, that she's uneasy about it, and her own feelings seem to lean towards, I can't make racists happy to make this community function the way they would like this to. They have to learn to deal with the fact that this is a changed community from what they remember, because a lot of the people she's referring to are folks who like have lived 300, 400 years before the second smothering was on set, versus some of the folks who are like halfling, drow, or Duergar migrant communities who may have only been here like a few decades, which comparatively is still a good amount of time, but it's not the same as like 2 or 3 centuries of living here.
Okay. Just a heads up for pacing, I have like 3 other points I want to ask, and like I said, I'm fine if she's like, go away.
I can condense, no worries.
Yeah, when after my first point, which is just what's your hot take on Mathura, and she starts talking about answers, I want to reveal that I am, I think it's pretty clear I have this informant that has told me stuff about Mathura. I'm concerned about Mathura. So I'm curious, specifically because she is interested in urban development. I want to know if there are any properties, because when she builds, there must, in my mind, be contractors or people who want to use the building. So I'm curious if there are any properties that seem like gathering spaces for speeches. Specifically, to give some examples, if there's a warehouse that she is responsible for building, a warehouse district, And then later, she never hears about any shipments going to that warehouse district. Or maybe she is responsible for granting someone a theater space, and then she never hears that they have any productions. I'm interested in if those spaces exist.
Yes, you've seen many of them as you've been going through the city. All of those sort of public combat courtyards, some of them also are more specifically designed for like open plays or bardic performances, or just open like speeches and conversations with the community. Like I say combat like courtyards and such, but that is just one usage of all of those open spaces. Many of the temples and buildings tend to have these open areas for people to congregate and just sort of do like open public debate kind of things, or just like someone who has a song on their mind and wants to perform for a crowd just because they can and they're struck by the spirit.
Yeah, I'm more curious about places that I guess are private. So my suspicion that I present to her is if Mathura is willing to openly suggest some of the things he's talking about, there must be a more radical form of that rhetoric happening in private as fuel for the quote unquote moderate discourse that sort of turns people onto the message. So I'm curious if there's any of those spaces within what they've worked on.
There's not anything in that range that she could give you any information on. Like most of the region's design is very open areas. The only private ones would be like homes of individuals. Like much of the city is designed with an open, again, it's an open kind of design to it. Even the temples tend to have, like Didi and Azerlath, I've already noticed, like a sort of open natural lighting effect to it.
Okay.
Like the purpose of that sort of redesign that she'll note is coming from a lot of, oddly enough, Durgar and Drow influence in architecture, is for the purposes of, we have seen what happens when everyone tries to do the whole be sneaky, be dark, underground dwelling sort of folks. And
okay,
we've lived, like a lot of the Drow have been some of the ones to suggest that, because it's like, we've been told in so many different historical accounts that we're the dark, evil people who hide underground. We just don't like the sun sometimes, but we get used to it. Like the rest of you have to get used to us being here. It's a lot of that kind of response. But
cool. That's actually promising, because that means recruitment's a lot harder. All right, third point. Curious about the city's career options. So in particular, there's a lot of angry energy, and I'm curious if there's a productive way of channeling that into labor, because currently I think it's channeling into fighting. And in particular, I'm curious if there's any way to channel it that can compete with higher pay, whether it's through benefits, whether it's through some sort of sense of community, sense of fostering community, because
I will tell you right now, pay is not something that's actually discussed very strongly in the city. Neither are benefits. There's nothing within that sort of system of economic thought that is actually very much applied in the city.
Okay.
Like at all.
Then I will. Okay, if that seems to garner a certain amount of confusion, I'm gonna go with what Martin and Alferens mentioned. Is there anything that might appeal to people who are swayed by like a sudden influx of gold, or is that target population basically very easy to lose to Mathura no matter what is done? It's
very easy to lose them, because the thing you have to understand, and this is for the benefit of players and also viewers in terms of how I've designed this sort of region, is that it's not so much capitalism doesn't exist, it's just that a lot of the people here have sort of agreed in how they've formatted the city over the past years, because Sayana would be able to tell you about a lot of these details from her having lived a fair bit and seen how this city has changed. The reasons a place like Cyrollily's Haven, for example, does the 1 week of like free lodging, and then but you have to promise to do the payback. That's how people have functioned and agreed to in a sort of communal style approach to living with one another. That's how they've structured the city post-calamity, post the onset of the second smothering. Much of this region's focus has been to that way of like, we've seen what happens when people get into scuffles and disarray and confusion over like money debts or money issues and stuff, but also what happens when people who need different levels of care aren't taken care of. So a lot of how that's been integrated into the city's proper design has been things like the oral historian region that tends to a lot of the older folks is also used as an area for helping design like accessible housing. It's used as a lot of the city works on let's say the manual labors that Bo is seeing at this moment, their recompense for that is that they're going to be guaranteed certain baseline, like low income, like the equivalent would be like low income housing, or like the druids, with them helping get the base materials, the druids are able to actually cultivate the fields where other farmers are able to know how to best think about for the future, who also help create textile workers materials. There's this sense of very much an integrated sort of down the line chain and connected, like essentially she'll put it as a spider web. All the threads are connected and reach out far and vast, and people do a lot of interdependent work on one another.
Okay. Okay, cool. So
this
there's
is my anti-capitalist region of the world. You need to understand. This is a very clear thing I have to make about this whole thing.
So there's no competing incentive structure because most people basically operate on social contract theory, and these are people who don't because they're okay. That leads nicely into my fourth and final question, and I'll let other folks go. I'm curious about where gold flow comes from, because so I say one thing that's very interesting to me is Mathura has a source of gold, and that doesn't seem to be from the city, because Mathura is willing to throw 300 gold at people for causing others to not enter Shantiko, like just discouraging them, and apparently without very detailed evidence, just trusting their word. That's, from my perspective, from my life as a cultist, that's a lot of gold to like throw at something without verification. So if not through a system, if people here operate through sort of a communal system, where is the gold flow? And the reason I want to know is because if we can cut that off, my proposal is, without getting into any fights and with using potentially urban planning resources, we can just cut off most of Mathura's ability to incentivize and empower his base.
I will tell you right now, you do know based off of previous history check, Mathura did come from a particularly noble and wealthy background. So likely, probably a good chunk of that gold is his own wealth.
Does he have like an origin that anybody knows of? And by anybody, I mean, I guess Sayana.
I'm telling you as your player character, and what I told you before from a previous check, you know that Mathura's background was from Backfire as an ex-noble, meaning he likely came from a substantial amount of wealth, because you've heard his name from the upper ring. The upper ring is the upper crust elite for Backfire.
Okay, gotcha.
So likely you would assume Sayana has no idea why he has money to throw around. Like, she has no clue. But I'm telling you as a DM, and also just for what you would know player knowledge, that's the baseline.
Gotcha.
What you would know, what your character would know.
Okay, if that's the case, I pretend I don't know that and ask her that question as if I don't. Is her response basically, that's a good question? Like,
she honestly did, like, she does not seem to think about the money like at all.
Okay. So that's not a good question. That's like an out of context question.
Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, that would cover, I think, a lot of the points you had.
That's all the points.
A lot of points. A lot of points. But yeah, depending on what y'all would like to do, if there are any other questions or investigations you want to do, I know that Didi and Zerlath, you had the possibility of also going to chat with, quote unquote, the primary sources in the other region, in the other sort of older folks section of the city as well, if you wanted to. They would have other historical accounts of anything you would want answers on.
Did the camera switch?
I
think they
yes,
did.
They did.
Okay. So Azarlath, maybe you should talk a little more while I fix this.
Yeah. So I think that might be better for another day. Just like procedure, like that would probably take a while, and like we would need to it's best to schedule that thing with sources. And also, I'm really sleepy, and I assume that I would be taking the lead on that. Yeah. Because the Serlath's literal job is getting information out of primary sources.
So yeah, if that's the case, you can be led over to the oral historians district. We'll refer to it as, just to have a phrase for it. And you see a sort of gray skinned with sort of a cracked rock terrain sort of effect on her skin, a Durgar dwarf who, when you ask around for some of the folks, because you would have been given one name from Rosa, which is Teleris Remura, a very old drow who would have been someone who's had the most experience both in documenting really anything in the history of Agni. This is like we're at like Rosetta Stone levels of importance of amount of historical information that this individual has, because he is, depending on who you talk to, he's lived anywhere from 700 to 1,000 years. Like, he is old elf. But you have this Durgar who greets you, who gives the name Vistra Jadefist. And she says, "Welcome, travelers. It's not often that Teleris gets people interested in speaking with him. I imagine you're interested in a story."
Yes.
I'm with them.
I imagine so. It's a pleasure to see another of the arcane craft among us. And there's a very deep sense of just respect and calm to this to the Duragar. There's just almost kind of like fey, ethereal like quality to their presence, despite the whole dwarven attire and dwarven like visage and all that. There's just this very faint, almost naturalistic tone in the style to their robes, and even their eyes have these very faint little bits of like green and yellow energy to them. But they walk you through to a very simple, humble room, very comfy bed of cloth with intricate quilted designs that have been sewn together very nicely, patterns of black tarantulas and other spider webs across it. And you see a very old drow just sort of sitting on the edge of the bed, just sort of, the skin, you've both seen elven people before, and it's very difficult to tell their age. You imagine this is a very old drow. Like, this is an elven individual who has very distinct wrinkles and sags across their face and around, and like dark circles underneath their eyes. The hair that's silver, typically of drow, almost has a faded, dull quality to it. And they seem relatively like thin, kind of frail, and not entirely all the way there, but they're just a little bit off, just sitting on the edge of the bed. You say, "Teleris, you have guests who are here for a story." And this very old, just sort of achy drow just seems to pick up a silver and gray tinged wooden staff with a long crooked cane, crook at the end of it, to just stand up for a little bit. And he sort of just comes forward to see you both. "Why, hello."
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Serla. I'm a scribe in service to Denier, and this is Didi.
I'm with them.
It's a pleasure to see you both. Ah, did you say Denier?
Yes.
It has been some time since I have seen a scribe appear in front of me. I have not seen a scribe in perhaps 3 or 4 cycles. There are not many who cling to such a old and perhaps bookish of faith. It is good to see the old map maker still has a few followers among the young. And you can see his expressions, like as he's moving, it's very sort of stilted, and occasionally you can see like him grip the end of the cane, somewhat pained expression, like he's kind of just, it hurts for him to move a little bit, but he seems like there's still some life in him. So what brings you to see old Tellerith?
What was the librarian's name?
Rosa.
Rosa. We were speaking with Rosa, and they said you had some interesting stories to tell.
I have lived long enough to have quite a few stories, young one. What would you like to know?
And I kind of turned to Dee Dee.
We were wondering if you could tell us what you recall about the first mothering.
I've known many an artist and many a fellow storyteller who still recall the first smothering. It was a chaotic time. The gods seemed to tremble, the very earth itself. The skies were lit with lightning, the thunder, and many other things of a dangerous sort. Give me but a moment to think on this. And while Tellerus is taking that moment to think, I would like to give a shout out to Ready to Roll for hosting us, as we have a party of 10 raiders coming in. Thank you so much. We love you for coming in to support us on this nearing the end of our session, but interesting historical moment with a wizened old drow. The first smothering was a time of calamity. The angels were in the air, not knowing where to pledge their fealty to. The bird was pained, from what many can recall, and many who I've spoken with. It was a difficult time. But chaos begets peace, and then peace begets chaos. Order and balance beget chaos and disorder, and the cycle continues, as it always does. Seems very lost in some of his own thoughts. There's little bits you pick up where it seems like, again, a lot of what you've read, you get other accounts of it, but just more of almost first direct, his sources. It doesn't sound like he was quite there, but he's interviewed and did direct archival research with the descendants, the direct descendants of those of the prime material plane who were born from gods. He's old enough to have lived, to have actually met those people, and it gives you a lot of that information.
And I ask as I'm listening whether you recall what happened to start the second smothering.
There was a pair of angels, one belonging to the Watcher Kronos, Gonepsith, and the other belonging to the devoted sufferer Ilmater. Two angels who served to herald the coming of the bird. They arrived near death, dying, and soon to pass away, and following that, a cry of pain across the sky, heard by all of us who lived through those times. In many ways, it's said by those of us who work in history that the cry of an angel brought forth the next calamity, that the arrival of an angel brings with it discord.
And
do you think...
Go ahead.
Do you think those we love and protect will remember us when we're gone.
I'm not sure. I think so, from what I can see of the city and what I've seen so far.
I'm sorry. I had a bit of a stray thought. It happens on time to time. What other story do you need to hear of, young ones? I have many stories.
What's your favorite story?
In the time when the calamity first arose and the years that followed, those of us who held faith, we thought the last sign of a god for each of us would be the sound of our own frustration as our own connection to gods faded. But I saw the gods. I still recall the god of this region and their siblings and the children of their siblings. I recall seeing perhaps a woman, perhaps a man, perhaps neither appear before me one day as I wandered this region, sometime after the eruption that bathed the land in fire and molten rock. And I saw a woman, a crown of cactus and flowers, become a snake, and then a bird, fly to the top of the statue that dots this region. And in those times, when a flood arrived, when all who still lived and survived through the calamity would arrive, I saw hope. I saw an arc of spider silk, of tears, of thunder and lightning appear to form salvation for those of us who were in need. It is my favorite story, for even in chaos and disorder, for even in times of strife and calamity, the gods have not left us. The gods are still here, and more importantly, we are still here. There are those of us who still wish to do good. Do you think people will remember me when I'm gone?
Does this sound like a repetition of the first line that was asked before?
No, it was people in general, and then now it's specifically.
I
Himself.
give a similar answer. And I look to Azerlath.
It's always hard to say.
Young one, that is the right answer, and that is the answer of a historian.
Yeah, you really can never know until it happens.
It's good to see such eager young ones not thinking they know everything for once. Sort of take some time to sit back against the bed, very tired, very uneasy, but at peace.
I try to sort of lighten or sort of bring a little spark of joy by casting Arcane Clock.
I was like, please tell me it's going to be Cause Bear, because if it's Cause Bear, I will die of happiness right now. So,
And I make like a little shiny clock for whatever long.
And you see his hands just sort of outreach to the clock, and you see he seems to have taken out something from a pouch in his robe, and it's just a little, again, it's the same symbol of Lulf that you've seen Rosa have, and he just puts it just as like almost like imagine like the little bird, not the ones that pop out of like a clock when a certain hour rings, but the ones that are like a nice little like figurine at the top of it, a sort of decoration, and he just sort of sets it to rest there. That's a nice sight. That's a nice sight.
Sorry, I was laughing because of chat.
I'm aware. I'm aware. I'm aware that for our viewers' benefit, our chat of my players is suggesting that we cast the bear and see what his response will be. Of wow, it's very pragmatic to immediately test this question. I love my players. I love you so dearly. But yeah, he seems very at peace, and he sort of takes a little clock device and he sets it on the little table by his bed.
It disappears after 10 minutes or an hour or whatever the duration of the spell, the original spell is.
Yeah, I think it's roughly like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But no, he looks quite happy. And again, if there's any other like bits and questions you want to hear from him, he seems like he still has enough energy to answer stuff. But for the sake of like expediency and brevity, I can give you a condensed version
at the moment. If Azerlath has any questions.
Wait, clarification. This is based on Arcane Lock, right?
I
Yes.
think so.
Arcane Lock lasts until dispelled. You've created a permanent clock.
Oh, well, then I've created a permanent...
Unless the duration changed.
I don't know, because I actually, when I studied the spells, I just wrote down the spell. I didn't actually write down all the details of the spell. So I'm sort of... I probably need to have a chat with Angela later and fill up what all the spells do.
Yeah, you can.
I gave you a joke spell book. I gave you the details, and this is how you repay me by not remembering the details to this ridiculous joke book.
Look, I'm handling a couple of things, and I forgot to follow up.
No, I am giving you shit. Like, there is no worry about it. Also, like, we were doing it an hour later than we would normally be doing this right now, our wonderful viewers. So we are still all semi-functioning at this point, but we may be reaching the end point of that very soon.
This is the time we'd be taking a break.
Yeah, this is when we would be taking a break. So for those viewers who are with us to see us still semi-function at this point, this is a rarity for us to last this long. But yeah, Teller's just sort of like, there's an eventual point where he gets like very tired and he looks like he's in a little bit more pain with some of his limbs and such, but he looks happier and more at peace than when you arrived, and Vistra just sort of like ushers you off to just say that like they'll be taken care of. God damn it, Ant. Ruining the moment. But yeah, no. We're able to get, if there's any additional questions past this point when you're in a more functioning state, either you or Zerlath, you can feel free to ask me either during the week or out of the game. But he's willing to chat with you. Like, you just get the sense he's just, even off passive insight, which I don't even think is very high for either of you. He doesn't seem inclined to lie or anything. He's an old drow who just knows a ton of shit. He could probably give you a lot of information.
Is he a wizard?
You can ask him if you do.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't ask directly like that, but I asked sort of like, well, actually, before I ask, is there any way for me to sort of deduce from sort of just mannerisms and everything whether there's arcane talent of some kind before I ask that question?
I would say roll me just an intelligence check.
Okay, I can do that.
Just a straight up intelligence check.
I can do that.
Not at this point in time. Like, you don't get the sense anything I'll say you don't get anything arcane, but you're not 100% sure. You get, based off the way he has the symbols for Lolth and the iconography, I'll put it this way. Your character doesn't know 100% for sure on this point, but you maybe get a weird feeling he's more similar to a Zerlath than he is to you. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah, then
But
I
you don't
probably
know.
wouldn't have asked that question. It's just one of those if I see any arcane talent. Basically, this is out of mechanics, me trying to figure out if I can learn spells. Bless you.
I would say, tell you what, I'd like both of you to roll me a persuasion check. Just to see what happens.
Oh, that is my favorite stat. Told you, I'm not a people person. I know stuff. What is it? I drink things and know stuff. I just know stuff. That's it.
No, you don't get the sense, like, even from that, it's not quite high enough. Like, he's too tired. He's feeling a little bit like out of it at this moment, and Vistra just sort of like, I think it reaches that point where you reach just the tail end before it becomes like insulting in terms of asking sort of prying questions or like inappropriate questions, where like Vistra just kind of slowly ushers you off, and he just sort of waves pretty happily. Like he has a very good, like, peaceful expression on his face. But yeah, you get ushered out by the Duragar druid very quickly after that point. It's like, hey, you wizard.
I didn't ask that.
Oh, I know. No, I know.
I was about to.
But yeah, I would say at this point, each of you has managed to have your individual sort of points of connection and investigation into the city. You've looked into different history and arcane practices. You've chatted with different folks about workers and such. You've gotten to work for quite a lot of hours at the quarry, and it's fucking exhausting, Bo. Like, it's just backbreaking labor for like hours upon hours, but it's probably right up her alley. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah, I feel like she'd probably be pretty satisfied at the end of the day, ready for that free meal.
Yeah, and building that appetite. That's a very good way of putting it. And when you all return to the inn, because I imagine there is a certain final point where you return to the inn, you do arrive just in time for a rather fantastic meal being prepared for all of you. Now, let me pull up my notes, because...
Did your audio cut out, Angela?
I
can
was
hear Angela.
fine.
Oh,
Can you still hear me?
yeah, because you started saying words, and I didn't know if you were just miming them or whether you were...
Assume it eventually, any coherent thought just becomes random flailing or gesticulations after a certain point at this hour. That's kind of the best way to operate. But you... Okay, let me see, where is it? There we go. So, you get served the following items. There, you smell as you're coming back into the inn itself, into sort of the front area, pork that smells like it has been... There is a sort of citrusy kind and vinegar kind of smell, and a heavy sensation, like heavy smell of like salt and like meat that has been stewed. Like, think like was it, or not pressure cooker, like a crock pot kind of meal where it's like just been cooking for hours upon hours upon hours, that is just greets you. It's like, and when you see Fenya sort of bringing this huge pot full of this meal over to the table where you're all sitting, there's this very, like, the word fall apart brings to mind a certain image. It's even more tender and delicate than that. Like, it is breaking apart into several pieces. The moment it even like get speared on a fork or anything, it's already trying to like fall through the fork. Like you almost need a spoon to get everything because it can be cut with a spoon. There's bits of like local sweet juices that are being served. There's kind of this the best way of describing it would be kind of like pockets of dough, like almost like a beef turnover kind of thing, but it's like about a football shape. It has a little corkscrew design all across the top of it with a filling of stew that's a little bit of chicken, egg, peas, and almost like a kind of a savory almost filling to it as well that she serves as sort of sides to that. And there's this kind of, it's potato-y, but it's almost like if you got a potato with the texture of jerky. It's almost like jerkied, kind of intense potatoes. But out of character, it's called chuño. But it is all very delicious. It is, you can tell it's had several hours of cooking and time and care, and is all available for you to eat. And it is a luxurious meal available to you to enjoy to your heart's content.
Bo's already eating.
Yeah, I'm digging in.
But yeah, there. For those viewing and our players' benefit, that was the slow roast sort of pork. That's just the thing that I found on various websites. But the dough pockets, those are salteñas, and the third one is chuño, which is sort of a kind of like a hard jerky kind of potato. It's one of like, I don't know, because it's the Andes. It's one of like 6 dozen types of potatoes that are grown over there, or styles of approaching a potato, because when it comes to potatoes, the Andes rule. We are the best at this. That's how that works. But yeah, it's been a relatively uneventful day. Nothing too serious in terms of anything events. From what Fenya can tell you, have been reported. You don't hear any sort of yells in the street in terms of like chaos or anything happening. It is a quieter evening. Open to you what any of you would like to do at this point, even if it's just settle in.
I am doing my usual ritual, but since I have the ability to scribe, I sort of I'd just do one more spell, just last hurrah.
Okay.
I'm gonna definitely tell everyone else, like perhaps even unless Dee Dee, if you went to your room in order to do this, if we're all kind of still together after eating, Bo would be telling them about what she learned from Gloria, and also the subtext of knowing that Gloria left something out and didn't want to speak about something.
Oh, wow. I actually wanted to meet with you at lunch and talk to somebody about Cord, but instead I talked to an urban planner for 12 hours. And what great fortune that your debrief with this random person actually conveys and answers every single question I had about Cord. Good on you, Bo.
Bo like gives a thumbs up.
Okay.
Asarlath, did you learn anything about lavenders and flowers and crystals?
No, we have not looked into that yet. We were focusing on our
That's tomorrow's research.
Dee Dee, I will note for your benefit, and perhaps our players, the rest of the players' benefits, though we'll see depending on what their reaction to the spell is. You do get another spell.
Ooh.
I'll add for context that Alfenia is just the last little nightcap. It's provided little bits of. Let me make sure I get the description on this correct.
No.
Recall that whenever my sister is reading, I leave.
Yes, Alfenia does deliver to all of you just a sort of a nightcap treat. This kind of lemon-zested dough with sort of a dense filling of heated and sweetened milk, of like sort of sweetened condensed milk into the center of it. Now, the reason I bring this up is that she delivers it to Dee Dee right when Dee Dee finishes scribing the spell. So this is a moment where all of you would probably have had to have answered your doors one after the other just to get the dough or the sweet bread that she has presented you with. Now, Dee Dee, as you finish speaking, you all just very faintly hear words of an almost fiendish sort of nature, but they sound really weird for abyssal. Like, it's very poorly translated abyssal on this occasion. The spell, from what you can tell, should say animate dead. But as you finish the last incantation and word and move your hands, all of you see your sweet dough begin to rise up into a small little humanoid form and just start waving at all of you.
I eat
I will
mine.
commit murder.
No.
I will immediately commit murder.
I will eat mine.
As you appear to have transcribed animate bread into your spell book.
Bo is very sad that her snack is now somewhat person-shaped form.
I think it's like a gingerbread cookie and I just munch on it.
So
No, not the head.
after I Eldritch Blast my snack to smithereens, what is the policy in Agni for formally disowning a sibling? For ruining so many otherwise pleasant experiences, like camping for the first time, or getting room service for the first time.
We're gonna put that under that falls under a far more bureaucratic jurisdiction and department than you currently have access to in this communally focused region.
All right, I'll do the next most bureaucratic appropriate action, which is to pout a lot.
After about a minute or two, the spell fades and the bread goes back to non-sentience.
Does it regather after I blasted it?
No. If you've blasted it, it's in shreds. But if you haven't consumed it...
Bo is going to immediately eat her bread because she's not giving it a chance to turn back into a person before it's in her belly.
Yeah, and Fenya just sort of like looks at all of this, and you just hear her as she's walking away muttering to herself, Did I add too many eggs this time or something? What did I do wrong? Like, she's genuinely confused and doesn't understand what caused this, so she's just like, oh no, did I bake this wrong? But outside of that event, if there's nothing else you want to accomplish for the evening and just go ahead and sleep, you all are able to do that. And wait.
Although I think as we're going to our rooms, Bo is going to say to Dee Dee, that one might actually want to use as a distraction at some point when we need to, get out of some place quickly.
And I say, yeah, I mean, this is as good as Cause Bear. And you see me put little asterisks and stars next to it as like, remember to prepare this.
Must prepare bear and bread-related spellcasting.
Look, they start with B. All good things happen with B. There's Bo. There's Piatt, I guess.
That's the one that's going to get me this evening. I will say...
I like that Maya literally means sibling, and now he's trying to disown you.
Specifically, male sibling.
Right?
It's I miss this group so much. So, there's nothing else. The evening concludes, and as we are approaching the end of our time for the session, I will have pretty much the last note that we leave people on that everyone is aware of. If you used anything during the day or what have you, everything's recovered, health is set, spells are available to you. You can prepare everything you'd like. But I'll say we leave off on you hearing, after a pretty decent, early start to the morning, just not cries, but a lot of like ruckus happening outside, and you see a crowd. Like you overhear people like chatting about that there's a crowd gathering a little bit of ways, like down a couple of streets, and from what you can overhear, it sounds like Mathurin is getting ready to give some sort of speech of some kind.
Oh, that guy.
And this is where we are going to leave the session for this evening, as it is about 5 minutes till, and I don't want to keep folks up later, because although it's an hour earlier, it's still late for folks, so let's keep this going. Now, before we close out, I'd just like to say again, thank you to, I think it was Ready to Roll and a few other folks who rated us during this. Thank you so much. We appreciate all the support, the subs for folks who turned in, of our players and other people. I think we had Blue Gray Sky and a few other folks here join us. There is currently today nothing up next on WTTP, but feel free. We will be rating someone. We'll figure out who that's going to be in a second.
I think Ready to Roll was active. We could return the favor, but I'm just double checking.
Yeah. Well, while you figure that out, I'll do my little ending spiel of thank you again. Love viewers, love folks tuning in to help support us. And we're going to do a little quick go around after do a quick thank of Roll20, So Nerdware, Tabletop Loot, and Devin Rue, all of you who support us and allow us to do these weird shenanigans of back and forth, bread, and other related spellcasting. So thank you for that. So going to go quickly around. Azerla, go first so that we can get you fastest to get to sleep soon.
Yeah.
So where can we find you? What do you do on the internet?
Yeah, I'm Aletta. I'm an illustrator and a bike courier. You can find me at a Firegender on Twitter, and my pinned tweet has links to all of my stuff. I also post like a lot of Final Fantasy XIV stuff and memes.
Alrighty, next up, Ant.
Hi, I just forgot my name. I am Anthony. I am Jojirius on Discord, or I guess I'm Jojiro now, Jojiro. I also run the blog dungeonanthology.com, where I blog about D&D stuff for fun, game theory, game reviews, random stuff, and I play the Hobgoblin Warlock, and I am very sleepy as well. Yay.
Alrighty, next up, our wonderful Bo/Lily.
Hi, I am Lily. I'm at Elise on Life on Twitter, and I'm the scribe on Twitch and Discord. And I'm here doing adventures in Agni. I also take part in Welcome Party RPG does one-shots on Sundays for all PoC. And we also do some one-shots on Mondays now, which is like a new campaign that we've started that I'll be participating in. I basically do a lot at Welcome Party because it is a awesome community. And I also am part of an all women actual play podcast called Misfits of Space. It's Star Wars.
Fantastic. And our last but certainly not least, our fantastic producer and lore mastery bard extraordinaire, Mariam.
I'm a wizard, not a bard.
So why did I say bard? Fuck.
I mean,
wizard.
I am an IRL bard, but I play a wizard here.
You are the bard of our lives. You support us and hype us up so much, and we love you. Or at least I do.
Yeah, so to keep this super sweet and simple, I am Mariam. You can find me on Twitter at media_junkie. I live at Welcome to the Party and do quite a few shows, which you can see on my Twitter. And I also am the GM of The Musafirs, which is a decolonized podcast, which is also on Welcome to the Party podcast channel. And yeah, with that, that's me.
Wonderful, and I'll try and make this quick. Hi, Angela. You can find me at Phoenix24Fem on Twitter. You can find me at Philosophym and Patreon. And you can find me on Welcome to the Party and several places now. Instead of just as a GM, I get to play now on a show, Homebrew World Friday, Let Sleeping Angels Lie, here as a DM for Agni, and on Sundays for 3V, as Lily has noted, and also something else starting tomorrow. I will not tell you what, but just stay tuned for a fun thing tomorrow. And also one half of the Queerly Yours podcast and a content writer for the Art for Ourselves online media publication, and now a freelance composer for TTRPG theme campaigns, of which Miriam's Politics and Plagues game has my first theme commission ever created for that. So if you're looking for someone to create themes for you, hit me up, because I make good shit, because I'm finicky as fuck. But that being said, love you all. Thank you for joining us for the start of this new season, and we're going to get into more intense celestial and planar shifting and intense D&D exploration and Agni. Love you all, and may Ignis bless you and provide you warmth and comfort to you all, and have a wonderful weekend.
Alright, so we're gonna raid Maddie Morgs because I couldn't find Ready to Roll. They must have finished. Hopefully this works. Ooh, I see. Ooh, yeah, we are raiding. So in a couple of moments, there's like an 8-second wait before that happens.
Are we offline, or are you?
I don't think we're offline.
No, we're not offline yet.
That's why I was waiting. We're all set. I'm waiting for the last night.
Are we just talking about raids?
No.
Okay.
We're about to finish in just a second. Ready?
So, unless it has that stupid thing off because I'm using the chat bot, it doesn't.
Oh well. I think we can call it good for the evening. Alrighty. Y'all ready to go?
Are we done? No.
I'm just gonna stop streaming regardless.